Chapter 251. Watch your feet. Don't step on snakes or whatever. I'm going back to make wine. And lizards, watch out. Jiang Hai was indeed a homebody, but he was really a homebody. When he had something to do, he was not very willing to stay at home. Ever since Moses Adams reported the bet between him and the Cartwright Company yesterday, Jiang Hai had become a homebody. After the security incident at the New York Beef Show, Jiang Hai took a group of people to the mountain to find what he wanted. Moses Adams was quite reliable. When Moses Adams came to the door to check the $10 million that Cartwright Company owed him, he gave it to him without hesitation. Of course, the expression on his face was very ugly. For such a company, reputation was actually more important than anything else. After all, they were doing the work of second-hand dealers. If a company owed money and didn't pay, or didn't fulfill their promise, then their reputation would be ruined. No other manor owner would sell the cow to them. At that time, they would lose more than $10 million. Therefore, even after paying the $10 million, they directly sent Paul K. to prison. At the same time, they also removed Rosalind Carlett from his position as the general manager. Of course, this was only on the surface. In fact, they also removed Rosalind Carlett from his position as the first heir of the family. It was not because he lost $10 million, but because there was something wrong with his vision. It was troublesome to talk about, but it seemed to be resolved very quickly. But since the paperwork had been signed, the $10 million had to be taxed. After it reached Jiang Hai, there were only $7.2 million left. Jiang Hai transferred $200,000 to Jiang Hai on the spot. It wasn't a small amount, but for Jiang Hai, it was nothing. In addition to the Cartwright Company's incident, the security company's matter was much simpler. This company couldn't afford to pay so much money. If they pushed a little harder, they could only give the company to Jiang Hai. But what use would Jiang Hai have for such a company? In the end, he said that the money the company owed him could be regarded as a shareholder. They didn't need to pay back the money. Jiang Hai owns 49% of the shares. He doesn't want the management rights. He just wants to use the company's security as soon as possible. He also wants to get a year-end bonus. Although this amount of money is just a drop in the bucket for Jiang Hai. But no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat, so Jiang Hai agreed. Moses Adams happily left Jiang Hai's villa. Jiang Hai kept thinking about what he said about snakes and other things. So that afternoon, he didn't play around at home. Instead, he went to town to apply for a hunting license. Although there were many guns in the United States, and there were many fish in the river, if you wanted to hunt with a gun and fish in the river, you needed a license. If you went into the mountains and fished without a license, you would be arrested. But after all, Jiang Hai was a local tycoon, and he had some connections with the police. So he just needed to report it, and it was done in less than half an hour. That night, he checked the weather forecast. After confirming that the weather was good, he called SH-20 Clive and asked her to go to the mountains with him tomorrow. Of course, Delina and Marion would go with him. But when SH-20 Clive arrived, Jiang Hai found that not only did she come, but her sister Karma Cliff also came. But it didn't matter. After Jiang Hai greeted her, he was ready to set off. This time, he only drove one car, the War Shield. Fortunately, the War Shield he bought was a real civilian armored car, and the interior was almost the same as real armor. It was not like other cars, where 2 people could sit in the front and 3 people could sit in the back. Instead, it could seat 2 people in the front and 2 rows of seats in the back. Turning around, it could seat 7 people, and turning around, it could seat more than a dozen people. This mainly depended on whether the driving license was enough. Counting Jiang Hai, SH-20 Clive, Karma Cliff, Delina, and Marion, there were only 5 people, which was enough. Of course, Jiang Hai went into the mountains by himself this time. Naturally, the people in his villa would not let him go like this. Belle was naturally still a bodyguard. Recently, Belle's identity had been gradually changing. It was indeed a waste to let a retired sniper from the Triangle State be a cowboy. Sometimes, Jiang Hai used him more as a bodyguard. But unlike ordinary bodyguards, he only went out with Jiang Hai when he went out to play. His identity was more like a friend than a bodyguard. Usually, in the villa, he still worked as a cowboy if he wanted to, and Jiang Hai still paid him as usual. But every time he came back from a trip, Jiang Hai would transfer him thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, and he accepted it with a clear conscience. After all, he did work hard. It was just that the relationship between the two was not explicitly stated, and it was not written in the contract. This time, not only did he bring Belle Lester, but Belle also decided to bring Xiao Bai, Goldie, Dai Teeth, and Chirps. As soon as these animals entered Jiang Hai's war shield, the originally empty war shield became a lot more crowded. After everyone gathered at 6:00 in the morning, Jiang Hai drove his beloved car to the Alabama mountains. It was now the last few days of April, and May Day was coming soon. It wasn't appropriate to say that it was early spring, but rather late spring. The situation on the side of the road was completely different from the last time Jiang Hai walked on this road. After the baptism of spring, the roadside trees, grass, and wildflowers were all in full bloom. Everywhere was a scene of green. From time to time, they could see some family farms on the side of the highway. Some old people, wearing jeans, were herding some cows and sheep. But unlike Jiang Hai's villa, they did not have many cows and sheep. Jiang Hai's villa had a lot of cows and sheep. As they sped along the road, Jiang Hai also opened the window. The breeze with the smell of nature blew into the car, bringing a burst of fresh air and gradually improving their mood. Cindy Clive, who was specially arranged to sit next to Jiang Hai, also opened her eyes wide at this time. Looking at the surrounding situation, it could be seen that she also liked this place very much. Not long after, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at their destination, the foot of the Alabama mountains. After parking the car in the parking lot, Jiang Hai and Belle got out of the car with a large group of women and animals. Following the mountain road in the parking lot, the group walked up the mountain. As they walked up the mountain, the scene that was originally yellow the last time they came here had changed. All kinds of trees were competing to show their vitality. Jiang Hai did not know much about trees, so he basically only knew a few kinds of trees. For example, red maple. This kind of tree also produced maple syrup, which tasted pretty good. He did not know about the rest, but Belle Lester knew a lot. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, he also introduced them. He introduced Tang Di, Chinese redbud, tulip tree, dogwood, locust, sourwood, deer eye, and so on. Jiang Hai listened for a while, but he did not remember any of them. Following Xiao Bai and Goldie, who had been walking in front, he entered a state of alert. Jiang Hai and the others had officially finished walking the outer mountains and entered the inner mountains. After walking for about half an hour, Belle suddenly raised his hand. Jiang Hai knew that this meant that he was on alert, so he immediately stopped and asked the 4 girls who had been following him to stop as well. Xiao Bai and Goldie instantly lowered their bodies and slowly moved forward. Although Jiang Hai did not teach them hunting skills, the 2 guys had self-taught themselves. The moment the 2 of them crouched down, Dai Teeth, who was originally lying on Little White's body, jumped down from its body. Although this branch rat was a little violent, it was still a vegetarian after all. It was not interested in meat or anything like that. As for Chirps, he has been following Jiang Hai. He grew up with Jiang Hai, so he was both interested in the forest and a little afraid. After all, if he can't fly now, he is actually just a big pheasant. "Boss, it seems that we have something for lunch," Belle whispered as he slowly moved to Jiang Hai's side. "What is it, wild boar or deer?" Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask excitedly when he heard that there was something. Neither, it should be turkeys, and from the sound, it should be a small group. Bell whispered when he heard Jiang Hai's words. As soon as he heard that it was turkeys, Jiang Hai's face collapsed a little. To be honest, he is not very short of turkeys. Domestic turkeys are sold in supermarkets, and wild turkeys are also available in Jiang Hai's forest. There is no need to hunt them in this mountain, but it doesn't matter. It's better to have something to eat than nothing. What's more, in the wild, naturally, they will eat whatever they encounter. Woof woof. Just as Jiang Hai was hesitating about what weapon to use to kill these guys, suddenly there was a burst of barking. In the grass in the distance, Xiao Bai jumped out of the grass for the first time. When he jumped, these turkeys were scared in an instant. You know, in the Alabama mountains, wolves have disappeared for a long time. Even if there are wolves, it is only possible to go deep into the mountains. Now, as soon as Little Black appeared, these turkeys were stunned. Although Little Black was not a wolf but a dog, it looked much more ferocious than a wolf. As soon as Little Black appeared, these turkeys screamed and hurried in the other direction, flapping their wings and trying to fly away. Turkeys may look stupid, but in fact, this bird can fly. Although they can't fly long distances, wild turkeys can fly 500 to 2,000 meters. This is just like a pheasant. Ordinary domestic chickens can flutter on the roof, but wild turkeys can fly some distance. These wild turkeys are the same. As soon as they see an enemy coming, they want to fly away, but can they? Chapter 252. Just as these turkeys were about to fly away, Goldie suddenly rushed out from the other side of the grass like a real beast. Without saying a word, it directly grabbed two palms and slapped the heads of the two turkeys on the left and right. After seeing it, it firmly pressed the two turkeys on the ground. At this time, the other turkeys had almost finished their acceleration. They flapped their wings and quickly flew away. But just as the last turkey was about to fly away, Goldie finally rushed over and bit the neck of the turkey in midair. After landing, the turkey struggled for a while, but soon it lost its strength and weakly hung on the ground. Hearing that the battle in the distance had ended, Bell stood up first. When he saw the situation on the field, he couldn't help but sigh. With these two guys, we can save a lot of trouble. Indeed, Goldie and Goldie were really good helpers for him. With these two guys, it was more useful than having two more people. He immediately ran into the circle and killed the two turkeys that were still struggling and hung them on his waist. Jiang Hai also took Xiao Bai's turkey and hung it on his waist. These turkeys were their lunch. After hunting the turkey, the group once again went deeper into the mountains. Not long after, they arrived at the small river that they had passed by last time. It was about time for lunch break. After Bell cleaned up the grassland, everyone started to get busy. Clive, Carmacliff, Delina, and Marion were picking up dry branches around the area. Bell was responsible for cleaning up the camp and dealing with the three turkeys. Of course, he also needed to make a fire later, but he brought a fire rod, so it wasn't too troublesome. As for Jiang Hai, he went fishing again. The nearby fish tasted very good. For camping like this, although they didn't do it often, they were familiar with it. Not long after, the four girls picked up enough dry wood. Jiang Hai also caught a pike and a perch, enough to make fish soup. When Bell made the fire, the three roasted turkeys and a pot of fish soup officially spread their fragrance on the land. After all, it wasn't natural gas, so the fire wasn't very strong, so the roasting process was slow and the fish soup wasn't fast. Therefore, except for Goldie, Xiao Bai, and Qiuqiu who were eating the turkey's organs in the distance, everyone else was sitting there and chatting. North Americans, or to be exact, Europeans and Americans, didn't often eat animal organs. Nobody knew why. However, compared to organs, they were more willing to eat meat. Other than the foie gras imported from France, which was considered delicious in their eyes, they didn't eat other organs, such as intestines, hearts, lungs, livers, and so on. However, although humans didn't like to eat these things, animals liked to eat them very much. It was obvious just by looking at the animal world. After hunting for food, animals in the wild first dug out the organs to eat. For example, in a wolf pack or a pride of lions, except for the leader, it was very difficult for other animals to get these things. This was because the organs were soft and rich in nutrients. They could provide enough energy and calories, and they were also very delicious. It was precisely because of this that animals would eat this thing. Although Little White, Little Yellow, and Xiaoqiu were not considered real ferocious beasts, Xiaoqiu should be, they would not be against these raw internal organs. After washing, they would be given to them to eat. Jiang, when will this thing be ready? Looking at Goldie, Xiaobai, and Xiaoqiu eating happily in the distance, and the meat in front of her, although more and more fragrant, has not been said to be ready to eat, Karmacliff couldn't sit still. It's almost ready. Let's wait for another 10 minutes. Looking at the chicken in front of him, Jiang Hai said to her. These wild foods must be roasted before they can be eaten, because as the people in the United States said, wild creatures more or less have some parasites and so on. If they eat raw, it's easy to get sick. Only when they are completely roasted can they kill these parasites and bacteria at high temperature, and then they can be eaten. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Karma was already very hungry, she still endured and kept staring at the chicken in front of her. Finally, after waiting for a long time, the meat was ready to be roasted. With Jiang Hai's order, everyone followed suit. 6 turkeys and 6 chicken legs, first one was scraped and divided in an instant, then 6 chicken wings were scraped and divided in an instant. When it was time to divide the chicken, everyone remembered the heroes who caught the turkey, Goldie and Little Black, one for each. Of course, what they ate was enough for Xiaoqiu to eat. Jiang Hai and the others ate the biggest one. After a while, the turkey was basically eaten to the point where only the chicken was left. Eating turkey and drinking fish soup, in fact, this kind of life is also very good. After eating lunch, everyone rested for a while. Jiang Hai and the others first extinguished the fire. After dealing with the fire, they didn't need to care about the chicken racks. This was because the animals here would eat the roasted chickens. After that, they took the garbage they created and continued to walk towards the depths of the mountain. Compared with the leisure in the morning, Jiang Hai and others were much more serious in the afternoon. After all, Jiang Hai came here for a purpose. He wanted to find snakes, lizards, and some deer to get some antlers. But now it's so warm, there's food everywhere, and the deer don't have to run around looking for food like it's winter. They can also have food in the mountains, so they can stay away from humans, so Jiang Hai hasn't met the deer here for so long this time, but the snakes let Jiang Hai encounter many times. Of course, it's not right to say that Jiang Hai encountered it. It should be said that Goldie and Xiao Bai encountered it. After they were full, they were more energetic than before. There were a lot of snakes in spring. After a warm winter, not only were the bears hungry, the snakes were also hungry. Even if snakes were cold-blooded animals, it was the same. Therefore, when spring came, all kinds of snakes would scurry around in search of food. It's still okay in early spring, because snakes are cold-blooded animals, if they don't get enough sun, they can't move. But now it's late spring, and snakes are also looking for food, so it's not easy to encounter them in the periphery. After crossing the river, Jiang Hai found more than a dozen snakes in almost an hour, but unfortunately, these snakes are not what he wants. Another flower snake. Looking at the snake in front of him that was held down by Goldie's claws, Jiang Hai picked it up and said with some pity. The so-called flower snake is called the many-banded snake in China. This kind of snake is poisonous, and it's a good ingredient for making wine. However, This kind of snake is more common in Southeast Asia and China, but it's not in the United States. The so-called flower snake in the United States is a fancy snake. This kind of snake is basically a grass snake or a water snake. It can also be called a cauliflower snake, because it's not poisonous, and it's not small. It feeds on small amphibians and rodents. Jiang Hai is looking for snakes, but not this kind of snake. If it's not poisonous, it's useless to make wine. Some people say that poisonous snakes can't be made into wine, because the snake venom will enter the wine. Whether it's taken orally or applied externally, it will lead to poisoning. In fact, this saying is wrong. Just like Chinese medicine, it's hard to understand how those medicines can be mixed together to cure the disease. Snake wine is the same, only poisonous snakes can have an effect and they're made into wine. Non-poisonous snakes are useless. Looking at the flower snake in front of him, Jiang Hai grabbed its tail and swung it. This swing is also a necessary method to catch a snake, because snakes only have one bone. This swing can temporarily paralyze it. After dealing with the snake, Jiang Hai also threw it into his backpack. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the four girls who were already far away from him couldn't help but frown. If you don't use it to make wine, why did you catch it? Sh20 Clive naturally knows the purpose of Jiang Hai coming here to look for snakes, but Jiang Hai said that he's looking for poisonous snakes, so what's the use of this non-poisonous snake? For eating, snakes are very delicious. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said while looking around. Hey, you're really abnormal, you actually eat snakes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff on the other side has already said. Don't be surprised. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged. What's so difficult to understand about eating snakes? It's not difficult to understand. Snake meat is very nutritious, even more nutritious than whips and the like. Jiang Hai has always liked to eat this, but now in China, if you want to eat snake, even if it's a non-poisonous snake, it's 100 or 80 yuan per catty, which is not a small amount. It's not like here, not only you don't need money, but you can also experience the feeling of catching it yourself. The most important thing is that snakes are really delicious. The taste is a bit like horse meat, but much more delicate. I've always heard that Wuxia people eat anything. I didn't believe it at first, but now I believe it. Watching Jiang Hai continue to search for traces of snakes, Karma Cliff on the other side whispered, she still has a hard time understanding how to eat snakes. At this time, suddenly Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. He found a small skink lying on the stone in front of him. It's actually a small lizard. He had already checked before coming here. This thing should be in the Alabakia Mountains. It's not so easy to find. He didn't expect his luck to be so good. Although he didn't find the poisonous snake, he found this thing. It's also an unexpected gain. Jiang Hai hurriedly squatted down and gestured to Little Yellow, who was looking for snakes in the distance. He wants to catch this thing. Chapter 253. Skink is a collective name for about 1,275 species of lizards in the world. They are distributed in all tropical regions of the world and in the temperate regions of North America, but most of them are found in Southeast Asia and the nearby islands. The largest one can grow up to 66 centimeters, but generally speaking, it doesn't exceed 20 centimeters. At this time, the skink in front of Jiang Hai is only about 15 or 16 centimeters long, and that's including the tail. In fact, according to this length, it doesn't seem to be long enough to make wine, but this is the first time that Jiang Hai encountered this thing, so naturally, he won't let it go. Under Jiang Hai's command, Goldie instantly lurked. He came to the side of the stone and slapped the stone before it could escape, pressing it to the ground. But unfortunately, it's the first time that Goldie has seen such a thing. Although it's very smart, it knows to hold the back of the snake's head when catching a snake, and it knows to bite the neck of a turkey when catching one. It also taught Xiaofan this. But when catching this little thing, it underestimated the enemy. Although it slapped the lizard's body, most of its power was pressed on the lizard's tail. Just when it thought that it caught the lizard and was about to call Jiang Hai over, the lizard's tail was instantly cut off. This kind of lizard is the same as geckos, they all know how to escape by cutting off their tails. This skink is obviously the same. Before Goldie could react, it had already cut off its tail and quickly ran away. It flashed a few times between the cracks of the rocks and disappeared. Damn, it ran away. Seeing Goldie's cute face looking at the half-broken tail of its subordinate, it was also stunned. Jiang Hai, who ran halfway, also helplessly smiled bitterly. In fact, he also forgot that this lizard can escape by cutting off its tail. Next time, I'll pat your head. But he knows that he can't blame Goldie for this. After all, Goldie doesn't understand this kind of thing. So after Jiang Hai walked over, he threw the broken tail far away, then patted Goldie's head and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Goldie couldn't help but stick out its tongue. In fact, it's also very embarrassed now. But soon, nature gave it another chance to show off. Today's weather was really good. It was a sunny day with the sun hanging high in the sky. Such weather was also the favorite of these cold-blooded animals. After walking for less than 5 minutes, they saw another skink, but this one was bigger, about 21 or 22 centimeters. Jiang Hai didn't need to say anything, as Goldie had already sneaked over. Under everyone's gaze, it went up and pressed the skink under its claws. The skink was shocked by the sudden attack. It wanted to run, but in the end, it couldn't. It kept struggling. This time, Goldie learned its lesson from its previous failure. This time, it pressed down on its head. No matter how hard it struggled, it didn't budge at all. Good job. Jiang Hai looked at Goldie's action and couldn't help but run over and pat its head. He grabbed the skink in front of him and stuffed it into his backpack. This thing is different from a snake. A snake needs to be soaked alive, but this thing needs to be soaked dead. After it's dried, it can be put into wine. But with the current Boston area's sun, it can be dried in a few days. Jiang Hai didn't care about it, it's naturally the best if he can get these things. With this skink, Jiang Hai's mood was much better. The group went deeper into the mountain. Not long after, they bumped into some rocks and found some skink. These skink mainly eat bird eggs, frog eggs, small fish, insects, and so on. These things can be found as long as there's a water source and grassland. It's not rare in the mountains. Therefore, although these things were not as plentiful as other species, they were not particularly rare either. It didn't take long for Jiang Hai to catch 5 large stone dragons. After that, he stopped catching these things. After all, there aren't many skink species in the mountains. It's better to let them reproduce. Since he didn't want to catch the stone dragon, Jiang Hai was going to catch the snake. Maybe God heard his words. Just as he walked forward for less than 10 minutes, Xiao He found something. In the distance, on the sun, there was a gray guy coiled there. Seeing this snake, Jiang Hai couldn't help but whisper, "It's a mud ball." His feet couldn't help but slow down. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Little He and Little Huang wanted to go up, but they were called back by Jiang Hai. What a joke, the previous snakes weren't poisonous. It's fine to let the 2 dogs go, but a mud ball is poisonous. If they're bitten, it'll be troublesome. So Jiang Hai decided to do it himself. He signaled everyone to step back, then he slowly crept up. The mud ball's scientific name is viper, also known as the piebald snake. It's a type of poisonous snake. There are many classifications. It's distributed all over the world. The more famous ones are Viper aculeatus, Viper intermediatus, Viper brachycephalus, and so on. The very famous bamboo viper in China is also a type of viper. The most common one in America is the copperhead viper. It can't be helped. America is the same as Asia. Basically, there are many species, but there aren't many truly poisonous species. The real paradise for poisonous creatures is Australia. Compared to the poisonous creatures in Australia, the poisonous creatures in Asia, Europe, and America are kindergarten level. When it comes to the real poisonous snakes, in addition to the sea snakes, the most famous land snakes in North America are the viper and the rattlesnake, but the rattlesnake's distribution is mainly in the southern area. There are many of them in California. Grabbing the viper's head and body, Jiang Hai happily took out a bag and put it in. This bag is a cowhide bag. There are some ventilation holes on it to prevent the snake from suffocating, but the cowhide is enough for it to bite through. After fixing the bag, Jiang Hai also tied it to his backpack. It's a good start. This makes Jiang Hai very happy. His original goal for this trip was 3, the stone dragon, the snake, and the velvet antler. Now that he got the stone dragon, the velvet antler wasn't particularly difficult to get. Now that there are signs of snakes, this is good news. He doesn't know if it's because this ball of dirt brought good luck to Jiang Hai. He walked into the mountain again. Not long after, Jiang Hai encountered 2 more vipers, but these 2 vipers should be 1 male and 1 venomous. At this time, they are, cough cough. It's spring, the recovery of all things. Animals also need to reproduce. Sometimes, people even need to have sex in the wild, let alone animals. At this time, the 2 vipers were doing it there, but Jiang Hai went up and forcibly separated the 2 guys. Jiang Hai wasn't going to catch the female viper, but generally speaking, it would take at least more than an hour for a viper to do this. 2 hours is the normal time. This shows how powerful Su Xian is. After letting the female viper go, Jiang Hai put the male viper into his bag. Fortunately, vipers didn't have the concept of family, so Jiang Hai didn't feel guilty. After catching the 2 vipers, Jiang Hai encountered 3 more. After putting them one by one, Jiang Hai's task was already 2/3 complete. It's getting late. Let's go back. However, unlike the excited Jiang Hai, Sh20 Clive and the others couldn't. These girls didn't have Jiang Hai's strong physical fitness. They were tired after walking for an afternoon, so Karma Cliff couldn't help but say to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai realized that it was already 4:00. Can we go out before it gets dark? Although they didn't get any deer antlers, Jiang Hai and the others didn't bring any tents or the like to spend the night here, so they needed to leave the forest before it got dark. Otherwise, if they waited until night, wild beasts would be fine, but some poisonous insects and the like would be impossible to guard against, so Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask Belle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle took out a compass and map and glanced at it, then said to Jiang Hai, "It's good to go now. Deer should also have a chance. After all, the lizards and snakes you were looking for at the beginning didn't have much demand for water, so they kept going into the forest. If you want to find a herd of deer, you just need to follow the water source." However, he also knew that this time, his boss came here with a goal in mind. Now that 2 of his goals had been met, the deer antler and the others shouldn't be too difficult. Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai waved his hand as the group walked towards the mountain. Seeing that they were finally going out, the 3 girls couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although they liked to come to the forest to play, it was still quite boring to play too late, especially when Jiang Hai had been catching lizards and snakes. At least 70% of women were afraid of these things, and these 3 girls belonged to this 70%. Since everyone had made up their minds to leave, their footsteps became a lot lighter for a while, but under Belle's intention, they didn't go back the way they came. Instead, they walked downstream of the river that Jiang Hai and the others passed by at noon, preparing to go upstream from here to see if they could find a herd of deer drinking water. Needless to say, hard work really pays off. At 5:00, when the sun was about to set, Jiang Hai and the others found a large herd of deer in the distance. There were about 50 deer in this herd. Basically, they were all white-tailed deer, which is the most abundant deer species in the Alabama mountain range. This kind of deer is different from elk and reindeer. Elk and reindeer have large antlers and have a certain degree of lethality. The moose was very strong, and it was not inferior to the bear in a frontal confrontation. However, the white-tailed deer did not have any special survival skills except for its speed. An adult male deer was 2 meters long and 1 meter tall at its largest, but its weight was only a little more than 100 kilograms or even a few dozen kilograms. This kind of self-weight allowed them to run fast, but they couldn't compete with carnivores. The only thing that allowed them to dominate the area was their strong reproductive ability. Ever since wild wolves and mountain lions became extinct in this area, they became the species that destroyed the ecological environment the most. Chapter 254. I finally found you guys. Looking at the deer in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. These are the guys he was looking for. At the moment, he also unbuckled the gun he had been carrying behind him and put the crosshairs on the deer in front of him. Antler, in fact, refers to the antlers of deer, but antlers are also divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades. The bigger and thicker the antlers, the better. As male deer age, their antlers will get bigger and bigger, and the same is true for white-tailed deer. Antlers have some effect for collecting and fighting, but they are useless for antlers. The best age for antlers is between 3 and 6 years old. Generally speaking, antlers between 2 and 3 years old are also very good. Therefore, Jiang Hai's target this time was the young male deer. For male deer of this age, no one would care about them. Soon, Jiang Hai aimed at a male deer with antlers about 10 centimeters tall. The August in his hand rose and fell with his breathing, slowly stabilizing. But just when he was ready and was about to shoot, the deer in front of him suddenly became vigilant. Almost in 2 breaths, they instantly exploded in all directions, and at this time, bursts of gunshots came from a distance. Then they saw the deer Jiang Hai had his eyes on was shot to the ground, and at the same time, more than a dozen deer were shot. Those doe that were not shot quickly fled this place after hearing the gunshots. What's the situation? Are there other people watching this herd of deer? Seeing his target being hunted in front of him, Jiang Hai frowned slightly. He didn't care much about a deer, not to mention that this deer was a wild one. To be exact, it didn't belong to him. The reason why he showed such an expression was mainly because he was a little surprised and also a little vigilant. From the gunshots, there are more than a dozen people, and there are only 2 men and 4 girls on his side. Anything is possible in the wild, so it's never wrong to be careful. At this moment, Jiang Hai also withdrew his gun and signaled Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai to hide to the side. He also told Belle to protect the other 4 girls behind him. In case something happened, he would be able to react in time. Although the 4 girls haven't encountered such a thing, they probably know that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the wild is not the beast, but these people, so they didn't say anything and just stood there without talking. After these deer left, a slightly dull horn sound came, and then a group of people walked out of the forest in the distance. There are about 15 or 6 people, all of them are very burly, and their looks are basically the same. They were wearing very casual clothes, but unlike Jiang Hai and Belle's hunting attire, they looked more like casual clothes. And the most important thing was that the people here weren't the average white or black people, but some of them looked like Asians. They have black hair and dark skin, but it's the kind of dark skin that belongs to Asia, not black people. They have big noses and deep-set eyes, and they look somewhat like the Mongols in Wuxia. At this time, these people are holding guns in their hands, but unlike the good guns in Jiang Hai and Belle's hands, the guns in their hands are very simple, and the handles are made of wood. They don't look very good. When they saw Jiang Hai and Belle standing there, these people hesitated, but 3 of them stood in front of Jiang Hai and the others, looking at Jiang Hai. The others quickly walked to the side of the herd of deer and began to harvest the deer's skin and meat. It's the Iroquois. The people on both sides didn't raise their guns, which also means that they are temporarily at peace. Seeing that these people don't seem to be hostile to them, Belle whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Iroquois? Hearing this name, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. This is the first time he's heard of it. It's a kind of Native American. The so-called Native American actually refers to all the indigenous people in the American area, not just one kind of human. It's similar to the meaning of the descendants of the Yellow Emperor in Wuxia. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't understand very well, as a teacher, Shanti Clive, who specializes in popularizing these things, stepped forward and said to Jiang Hai. Native American was actually not a good term. It was a general term used by the European invaders for all the natives of the American continent except for the Inuit. The famous Mayans, Incas, and Aztecs were all called Native Americans. However, outsiders didn't call them that. For example, the 56 ethnic groups in the country were naturally called Wuxia to outsiders. In detail, they were divided into other ethnic groups, and the Native Americans were the same. However, most of the Native Americans had been massacred in the 16th century. Only a small number of Native Americans escaped into the mountains at that time, or escaped to Canada to survive. However, before 1950, the Native Americans were still the most hunted ethnic group in the American continent. There had always been people who said that the Wuxia were like pigs when the United States was first established. Their status was even lower than that of black people. But in fact, at least the Americans would still hire the Chinese, let them live on the land, and let them earn money to live. Compared to white people and black people, there were naturally three types of people, but compared to the Native Americans, it was much better. After all, in the eyes of the Americans, the Native Americans were worse than pigs and sheep. Pigs and sheep had to be raised to provide meat, but the Americans killed them. They killed for the sake of killing, that's all. The famous Sioux, also known as the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, were exterminated just like that. They were so shameless and bloody. The Iroquois had once formed an alliance in order to resist these people. However, later on, the alliance broke up. Most of the people fled to Canada, and some were raised like livestock by the American government. It was not until 1950 that the United States began to officially accept these people. However, these people could no longer accept the United States. They did not need the jobs provided by the United States, nor did they need to integrate into the American culture. They only lived in their own residential areas. Most of these residential areas were now protected areas or national parks. The Americans, regardless of whether it was because of conscience or because of international pressure, divided these residential areas into residential areas. These people were given some residential areas. Without their invitation, no one was allowed to enter. After decades of development, although the two still had an unresolvable grudge, at least they would not fight each other as they did in the beginning. Of course, if the citizens of the United States were killed because they invaded their territory, then their deaths would be in vain. Furthermore, they would not easily attack American citizens outside their own territory. It was a form of peace. Seeing that these people were about to leave after quickly processing the meat, Jiang Hai could not help but look at the sky. To be honest, it was already a little late. If he let these people leave just like that, he would not be able to get his deer antlers today. It was not easy to come here today. He could not come here every day to hunt, so after hesitating for a moment, he took a step forward. As soon as he stepped forward, the three people who had been watching him vigilantly couldn't help but be startled. Their hands that were holding onto their guns instantly tightened as they looked at him nervously. However, Jiang Hai wasn't a hoodlum. After handing the gun to Belle, he shouted at the people in front of him, "Who among you can speak Chinese? Oh no, English? I want to buy the antlers of the deer you hunted." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three people hesitated for a moment before they understood. One of them also took a step forward. You want these antlers? Sure, what are you going to exchange for them? Don't tell me the dollars you use outside. I'm not interested in that. Although the Iroquois now said to live in their own small circle, they still had to make a living. They couldn't rely on just eating and drinking to make a living. They also had consumables, but they didn't have light or heavy industries. The only way to make a living was to use the leftover leather or some handicrafts to exchange for things outside. Of course, they would generally only trade with merchants they trusted. They would not trade with others. Compared to yellow people, they hated black people and white people more. If Belle had said this, they probably would not have cared. What do you want? We can discuss it. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. As long as they were willing to exchange, it was fine. Clothes, food, cloth, steel, weapons, anything is fine. It's up to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai nodded. They were going to leave anyway. Other than the skinks and vipers, he could give them the rest of the things in his backpack. This is a tent, this is a tactical dagger, this is a set of my clothes, this is a searchlight, this is a camp pot. Take a look and see what you can exchange for. Jiang Hai took a look at his things, put them in a backpack, and threw them over. All of these things added together weren't cheap. It was about $1,000. After all, Jiang Hai wasn't a real backpacker. He didn't know much about these things. Since he didn't know what was right, he bought the expensive ones. Perhaps the price-performance ratio was the lowest, but at least the expensive ones were indeed better than the cheap ones. This was undeniable. Taking the things that Jiang Hai threw over, the man also rummaged through them. After taking a look at these things, a satisfied expression appeared on his face. He turned his head and shouted a few words to the people behind him. The people who were processing the deer heads stopped. These things are very good. The quality is good. Very good. These deer heads are all yours. Seeing that everyone stopped, the man also turned his head and said to Jiang Hai. Then he waved his hand and left quickly with the people behind him. So easy? Hee, this time there are even decorations. Watching these people leave quickly, Jiang Hai was also happy, he had made a big profit. Chapter 255. F***ck, you went into the mountains again? And you hunted so many deer? Where's the meat? Leave some for me. In fact, Jiang Hai was not a person who liked to show off. This could be seen from the fact that after he made money, he did not go back and slap his relatives in the face. Secondly, he did not slap his classmates who looked down on him. But since Fu Yuan came, Jiang Hai also liked to check his WeChat. Of course, he didn't say anything. He was so happy today, so he couldn't help but upload a photo of himself, the 4 girls, and a bunch of deer heads. As soon as he uploaded it, Fu Yuan liked it. I don't have deer meat, but I do have deer heads. That's if you can bring them back. After replying to Fu Yuan's WeChat message, Jiang Hai happily carried these things and went to the parking lot at the foot of the mountain. He piled these things on the roof of the car and got into the driver's seat first. To be honest, after playing for a day, Jiang Hai wasn't too tired. After all, his heart was happy, and his body was strong. If his heart wasn't tired, his body wouldn't be tired. On the contrary, he still wanted to continue. If it wasn't for the fact that the sky was completely dark, he really wouldn't want to leave. However, the others did not have such a strong physique, especially the 4 girls. Although they were still smiling, their expressions were mixed with fatigue. It could be foreseen that these girls would be able to have a good night's sleep tonight. As for Belle, although he wasn't as indifferent as Jiang Hai, he wasn't as tired as the girls. For him, this day was just a very ordinary day, nothing more. Phew, let's go home. Let's go to my place and eat something. Then I'll send you and your sister back. Looking at Clive, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. With her by his side today, Jiang Hai was very happy. Then I'll have to trouble you. By the way, I heard that your New York beef show was very good this time. The beef in your manor is almost sold out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive was quite used to Jiang Hai's special grade A beef. She liked to eat it very much, plus her relationship with Jiang Hai. She was also very happy that Jiang Hai's beef had changed from the original beef to green muslin. How can it be so fast? This news can spread all over the world in a day, but I don't want to rely on those second-rate companies. And those who have the ability to buy my beef need some time to prepare. But recently, I've sold 2,000 of them. Hearing Sandy's words, Jiang Hai said happily. He really made money this time. Oh. Congratulations. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive also said to Jiang Hai in half-baked Chinese. Although the front and back of the hands were wrong, the posture was wrong, and the pronunciation was wrong, but Jiang Hai was still very happy, and the corners of his mouth were wide open. How lonely it is to be invincible. How empty it is to be invincible. But at this moment, he couldn't help but hear music, which made Jiang Hai a little embarrassed. This was his phone's ringtone, but it was not set by him, it was set by Daliana. Jiang Hai was speechless, but Daliana seemed to like this song very much. It's probably Fu Yuan, I just replied to his WeChat and he called me? Because Jiang Hai was driving, he didn't see who it was, and then he picked it up. Hello, is this Mr. Jiang Hai? Do you still remember me, Mr. Jiang? When Jiang Hai picked up the phone, the first thing he wanted to say was, "Animal, are you coming?" But when he heard that it was a woman's voice, he swallowed his words. After hearing the voice's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. She knew who he was, but she still asked if he remembered him. This made Jiang Hai a little confused. He was silent for 3 seconds in front of the phone. He carefully thought about the person who had his phone number. He was very sure that the person who spoke with the strong accent of the American Empire could not be someone from his country, so it could only be someone from the American Empire. However, the only person from the American Empire who knew his phone number, besides those in the manor, seemed to be Sandy Karev, who was beside him. But who was this woman? Oh, sorry, I'm driving, so I can't hear you clearly. May I know who you are? Since the other party knew him, but he didn't know her, Jiang Hai thought it was better to ask carefully. As for phone fraud, it shouldn't be possible. I'm Walton, Mr. Jiang, you're so forgetful. Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't recognize who she was, the other side of the phone was silent for a second, then the voice began to introduce herself as if nothing had happened. Oh, Miss Walton, hello, hello. Hearing the other party's words, Jiang Hai also remembered. Indeed, he gave the phone to this woman, who he met for the second time at the New York beef show. The relationship between the two of them wasn't close, but they weren't strangers either. At least, they had met before. Hello, Mr. Jiang, I don't know if Mr. Jiang still remembers you? What you said, about the cows in your manor. Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton said seriously on the other side of the phone. She made this call because of this. No problem, but now my cattle have been reserved for 2,000. If you want cattle, please make a decision quickly. Listening to Walton on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai also said seriously. In that case, I'll see you tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Walton on the other side of the phone seemed to have been prepared for a long time. She said to Jiang Hai calmly, and at the same time, made an appointment for tomorrow. Then the two of them said a few words casually and hung up the phone. Jiang Hai also started the car again. It was really a happy day, and Shenty Clive, who was sitting next to him, also looked at Jiang Hai with a happy face. She knew for a long time that Jiang Hai's cattle would be successful. Now that she saw that Jiang Hai's cattle were really sold, she was also very happy. The two of them chatted like this, and not long after, the car had returned to Jiang Hai's manor. First, the skinks and vipers were kept in a separate space to be dealt with, as well as the deer heads. Then Jiang Hai and the others had a delicious steak and seafood feast. After sending the Clive sisters back to their home, Jiang Hai also returned home. But as soon as he came back, he found that his two daughters, Daliana and Marian, were sitting in the living room at this time, looking at the TV in front of them, yawning loudly, but they didn't go to sleep. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised. "What are you two doing here instead of sleeping? You're back." Seeing that Jiang Hai came back, the two girls got up from the sofa and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face, trying to pretend that they were serious, but the effect didn't seem to be very good. Instead, they looked very cute. Looking at the expressions of the two girls, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He walked forward and pinched each of their faces, then put the two girls on his side and said to them, "You two, do you have something to tell me?" Hearing Jiang Hai's question, the two girls looked at each other. In the end, Daliana opened her mouth and said, "Well, we want to ask you, is it possible for you and Teacher Sandy to be together?" Hearing Daliana's words, Jiang Hai, who was still smiling, couldn't help but smile, then he shrugged his shoulders. "I think I should have told you about my situation. I was married in Wuxia, but nothing happened between me and my wife for more than a year. At that time, I knew that we were not people of the same world, so I made up my mind at that time. I wanted to leave her, I wanted to start anew. Then I came to this world, and when I took you in, I used her identity, so I can't divorce her casually. As for Shenty Clive, I have a good impression of her, but because of that woman, I have a bit of a dilemma." Jiang Hai took a deep breath. In the past few months, he had gradually told the two girls some things about him. But today, he said a little more. He didn't want to put the matter between him and Qi Li on the two girls. This was unfair to them. But if he didn't say anything, it wouldn't be a good idea for them to continue to be in a stalemate. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who didn't say anything and kept it in his heart. He also wasn't the kind of person who liked to tell others everything because he didn't want to feel pressured. He could only be said to be in between the two. If he felt that he could say it, he would say it. If he felt that he couldn't say it, such as tattoos and dragon scales, they would be his lifelong secrets. No matter how close he was to them, he would never say it. "So, we have a mother in Wuxia?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Marian said worriedly. "Yes, but I guess you won't be able to see her for the rest of your life." Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai was very clear about how big the Qi group was. Qi Li and Delina would probably never be able to see each other. "Well, let's not talk about those unhappy things. About me and Teacher Xanthi, let's leave it to fate. At least we're not in love now, right? Quickly go upstairs and sleep. There are guests coming to our house tomorrow." Patting the two girls' heads, Jiang Hai said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls didn't think about their future for the time being. They quickly nodded and ran upstairs to sleep. But just as Jiang Hai was about to go to sleep, two women boarded the plane from the imperial capital to New York. Chapter 256. Late spring, also known as the early summer sun, shines on the earth. Everywhere was green. From time to time, there were some small animals in the grass, but there were more flying insects, which meant that summer was coming. A super sports car was roaring at this time, speeding on the National Highway of Boston. In the world of supercars, people who really play with cars will not drive Porsches or Ferraris. It is because they think it is beneath them. Even the popular Taurus in China is regarded as the favorite of the nouveau riche in the US. Generally, some cultured supercar enthusiasts drive cars that are not very famous in China. For example, Koenigsegg, Pagani, Gombert, etc. Many people in China have not heard of these cars, but many people in the US like to drive them. In some real rich areas, driving a Lamborghini, Bugatti Veyron, etc., will be looked down upon. The car that is speeding on the road is called Rizvani. This is a small car brand in California. It is not a listed company and does not sell cars. This small company only accepts orders and has professionals. So, although the brand is small, it is very popular in the rich circle. However, there are always some people who are not willing to spend a few months to buy a car and let them build it carefully. So, in order to survive, this small brand launched the first car that does not require orders. It is a car that can be bought in a car shop. It is a buster beast. As soon as this car was launched, it successfully entered the supercar market. However, this car is not the beast, but a real car built by a private company. 2 people are sitting in this 2-seater supercar. To be exact, they are 2 women. The woman sitting in the driver's seat has met Jiang Hai twice. Her name is Prawalton. Perhaps Jiang Hai does not know this person. When he came back, he searched Google but did not find anything about this person. But in fact, this person is very famous in the upper circle of the US. There were many retail giants in the world, but when it came to the real giant, there was only one, Walmart. Back in Bing City, the citizens of Bing City had some prejudice against Walmart. There was a saying, descendants of the dragon go to the Dragon Tower, only S13 go to Walmart. However, this sentence did not affect the reputation of this company on a global scale. This was also the only retail giant that could climb up the Forbes list. It was even ranked first in the world's top 500 last year. As for the surname Walton, it was actually the surname of the founder of the Walmart family. Walton was the daughter of the current head of the Walmart family and his second wife. She was 31 years old this year and was already in charge of one of Walmart's boutique brands, Sam's Club. There was a reason why Sam's Club was called a boutique store. This was because the things that were sold here were not things that could be bought in a supermarket. They only sold boutique products. It was precisely because of this that she set her eyes on Jiang Hai. Since the New York Beef Show, she had wanted to talk to Jiang Hai about buying Jiang Hai's beef. But as the manager of Sam's Club, she had to consider the company's interests. Nothing can be done just because you say so. Therefore, she specially went to talk to her father these days and even called for a board meeting to discuss this matter. In the end, she got the rights to sell the beef for $1 billion. Of course, she could increase the price further, but she had to consider this. After negotiating these things, she hurriedly came to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't come alone. Sitting beside Walton was the girl that Jiang Hai had met twice, Selena Gomez. Recently, Gomez had not been in a good mood. Her ex-boyfriend, Justin Bieber, was talking about her everywhere. There were also some small celebrities who had been using her for hype, which also had some impact on her work. In addition, the new DJ she found seemed to be a little unreliable. After she clearly refused his private invitation several times, he didn't seem to care too much about her music creation, which made her a little upset. This time, with Walton's invitation, she agreed without hesitation. She really needed some time to relax. The weather here in Boston is much better than in New York. Look at how cool it is. While driving, Walton said to the girl next to him. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. Yeah. With a chuckle, Selena Gomez said weakly. But she had to admit that the weather here was really good. Boston was located in a bay, which made it not hot in summer and not cold in winter. For example, it was now the end of April and the beginning of May. According to Boston's dimension, many places were already more than 20 degrees. In some central areas, it may have reached 25 or 26 degrees or even higher. But here, it was still only about 20 degrees. The hottest time was 1 or 2 degrees. When it was cold, it was 17 or 80 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was not big. Coupled with the sea breeze, it was very comfortable to wear a short-sleeved shirt inside and a jacket outside. Don't think about such messy things. Aren't we just out to play? You have to relax. Maybe seeing that his companion was not very happy, Walton also chuckled. She put her hand, which was originally on the gear lever, gently on the tight thigh of the girl next to her. As her hand was put on, the girl couldn't help but tremble, but she still picked up her hand and put it back. Seeing that Selina didn't seem to like this, Walton also shrugged. She stepped on the accelerator and accelerated instantly, rushing toward the address Jiang Hai told her. Soon, a gate appeared in front of them. Jiang Hai's manor was originally called Green Forest. However, Jiang Hai was not an Irish fairy, so after he came, he had already reported to the local government during the new year and turned the original Green Forest into Soaring Dragon Manor. Although the locals still like to call this manor Green Forest, Soaring Dragon was already the official name. Jiang Hai also changed the gate of the manor. Not only was it replaced with an electronic switch, but he also deliberately engraved the appearance of a Wuxia dragon on the gate of the manor. When he first engraved this dragon, he almost made a fool of himself because the other party always thought that Jiang Hai wanted to engrave a Western dragon. After all, in the eastern United States, the civilization of Wuxia was not as much as that of the West Coast. The Western dragon was actually evil in European and American mythology. Its main occupation was to snatch princesses, collect treasures, and slaughter villages. They didn't quite understand why Jiang Hai wanted to engrave such a thing, but fortunately, Jiang Hai quickly explained it, so they didn't make a mistake. Otherwise, Jiang Hai's manor would not look good if there was a fat lizard on it. We're here. As the sports car came to the gate, Walton also pressed the horn. Hearing the sound of the horn, the TV at the gate also lit up, and Jiang Hai's face appeared on the TV. "Hi, Jiang, it's us." Seeing Jiang Hai's picture, Walton also shouted loudly. Although Jiang Hai was not familiar with Walton's voice, after all, they just talked on the phone yesterday, so he immediately opened the door. As the car drove into the manor's parking lot, Jiang Hai also walked out of the villa. "I thought you might have a few cars. Is it just the two of you?" Looking at the two people who parked the car and walked out, Jiang Hai said with some surprise. "These two guys dare to come to my manor so blatantly? You don't look like a bad guy. What are we going to do first?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, Walton put the sunglasses high on her hair and asked Jiang Hai excitedly. Aren't we going to see the cow first? Or the beef first?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. Isn't this woman here to talk about business? But listening to her tone, it seems that something is not quite right. What's the hurry to see the cow? If you deal with us for a spot check, I will buy it and cry to death. So we are going to stay here for a few days. Your manor is so big, there is a place for us to live. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little surprised, Walton leaned on the car behind her and said with a light face. What do you mean?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai had already guessed what she meant, but he still couldn't believe it. Are all the women in the United States so friendly? No way, let's play first, then talk about business. Didn't you invite us to come over to play? You won't regret it, right? Seeing Jiang Hai's helpless look, Walton laughed and pulled Selena Gomez beside her, and walked toward Jiang Hai's villa. Looking at the two women who seemed to have made up their minds, Jiang Hai grinned. In fact, in Wuxia, they would contact each other when they had time and come out to play when they had time. These words were nothing more than courtesy. These Americans were really honest. But after all, these words were said by him. Although Jiang Hai was not very used to two guests suddenly coming to his manor, he was usually quite bored at home. Now that someone came here to play, he didn't care. Okay, as long as you don't worry, then I will prepare 2 rooms for you. Looking at the 2 women's indifferent look, Jiang Hai shrugged. Not to mention that they might be his clients, he did say that he would invite them to play. In addition, he was also very happy to play with Jiang Hai. It was better than being bored alone, so he agreed at the moment. Chapter 257. With Jiang Hai's agreement, Prawalton couldn't help but smile. She immediately pulled Selena Gomez, who was still a little unsure, towards Jiang Hai's villa. But just as they opened the door of the villa, they saw Delina and Marian. This pair of beautiful little girls were sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching TV. Unlike other 14- or 15-year-old girls, this pair of little girls usually didn't have many friends. Their previous life made them not very interested in the internet. Compared to playing online, they were more willing to sit in front of the TV and watch paid channels. Their favorite program was talent shows, such as ABC TV's Dancing with the Stars, NBC TV's America's Got Talent, Fox TV's American Idol, and even CW's America's Top Model. Compared to the American TV series that Jiang Hai likes to watch, they were very ordinary. At this time, they were sitting there watching America's Top Model, which Jiang Hai has also watched before. But to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't care much about this program. Although he liked to watch beautiful women, most of the supermodels were, ordinary. Their figures were great, but they were too thin. As for their faces, it was just so-so. Although Jiang Hai wasn't completely obsessed with looks, when a man looks at a woman, the first thing he looks at is the face, then the figure. As for clothes, it doesn't matter. At least Jiang Hai didn't have such taste. When Prawalton walked into the room, her eyes lit up as soon as she saw Delina and Marian. Wow, what 2 cute little girls, are you twins? Why are you so beautiful, do you want to come to my house to play? As soon as she saw the 2 girls, she showed her most powerful excitement, scaring the 2 girls. They looked at her with some horror, unconsciously moving to the sofa next to them. These are my 2 girls, Delina and Marian, this is your Aunt Prawalton, and Selena Gomez, aunt? Or sister? Looking at the appearance of the 2 girls and Prawalton, Jiang Hai immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the 3 people, temporarily attracting their attention. You have to call her sister. Sister, do you understand? This is also my elder sister. Prawalton's face darkened when she heard the words, Jiang Hai's auntie. She never thought that she was old, but this guy actually called her auntie? Alright, it's elder sister. Alright, you guys go back to your room and read your books. I'll bring your 2 elder sisters to see their rooms. They'll be staying with us for a while. It could be seen that Daliana and Marian were still wary of strangers, so Jiang Hai stepped forward to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana and Marian immediately stood up and bowed to the 2 people in front of them. Then, they quickly ran to the 2nd floor. Looking at the 2 escaping figures, Prawalton's expression made Jiang Hai feel that it was a pity. Go upstairs. Since you're not afraid that I'll have any bad intentions, you can stay in the guest rooms upstairs. I don't have any guest rooms specially built for guests. The other workers' rooms are standalone villas, and they are already occupied. Looking at the 2 people in front of him, Jiang Hai shrugged. At the same time, he made up his mind to try his best not to let Delina and Marian be alone with this guy in the future. That's troublesome. But fortunately, when Delina and Marian weren't around, Prawalton didn't act like that. It was as if she had instantly restored her original aura of a queen. She just nodded to Jiang Hai faintly. Then, Jiang Hai brought the two people to the second floor and opened the two guest rooms furthest away from him. Usually, Aphrodite and Marion would come over to clean the guest rooms, so the guest rooms weren't dirty now. Looking at the guest rooms in front of them, the two were actually quite satisfied. Actually, we can stay in the same room. Looking at the big bed in the guest room, Walton muttered in a low voice. I'll go change first, see you later. But as soon as she heard her words, Selena Gomez jumped up immediately, nodded gently to Jiang Hai, then immediately walked into the other room and locked the door. Looking at her appearance, Walton couldn't help but smile. Interesting. As her voice fell, she walked straight into the room and closed the door. For a while, Jiang Hai, who brought them here, became the most awkward person. He really didn't know whether to leave or stay. But Jiang Hai's awkwardness only lasted for a while. He gave up, turned around and walked back to the first floor. He needed to calm down. These two women said that they wanted to play in his manner. As the host, and one of the two may be his partner, Jiang Hai also thought about what to play in his manner. Riding, going to sea, fishing, hanging out on the beach, that's probably it. Now the weather here is not very hot, the water probably can't go down. Jiang Hai felt cold when he went down. These people probably can't go down, so it's almost the only thing to play. If they want to go to the forest or something like that, they also have a forest here. It doesn't matter if they want to play in it. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about what to play there, the two women upstairs had changed their clothes and walked down again. However, the so-called change of clothes was just changing their originally fashionable clothes into some loose clothes. That was all. Let's go. As soon as they went downstairs, Walton said with a smile. Oh, okay, but where do you want to go? Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai also stood up and asked them. The beach, what else do you have to play here besides the beach? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Walton gently twirled her hair with her fingers and looked at Jiang Hai with a little surprise. There are a lot of things to play. You can ride horses, go to sea, fish, but you can go to the forest to burn guns, and most importantly, you can see the cows. Hearing Walton's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her. I always feel that today's Walton is a little different from the iceberg lady I saw before. Why is she crazy, and a little chinibu? This doesn't fit the image of her in my heart. Then let's go to the beach first. Ignoring the ridicule in Jiang Hai's eyes, Walton said with certainty. Since she has already said so, Selena Gomez has no opinion. In fact, this time she was dragged here. She doesn't care about what to play. For a star like her, a female tycoon like Walton, what hasn't she played before? Does she really care about Jiang Hai's broken manner? They came here to kill time and relax, that's all. As for work and the like, it's secondary. Okay. Since it has been decided, Jiang Hai did not refute. After walking out of the villa with the two, Jiang Hai drove a four-wheeled motorcycle, and the two here also drove one in front and one behind, along the road paved in Jiang Hai's manner, toward the beach. But it didn't take long for Walton to overtake them. Where is that? Pointing to a small manor on the left of Jiang Hai, Walton couldn't help but ask. That's a wine manor. Glancing at the manor over there, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say. Do you still have red wine here? Walton's eyes lit up when she heard Jiang Hai's words. Yes, but it hasn't started brewing yet. It's still in the planting stage. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded. He planted these grapes, naturally, to make wine and sell them. Of course, if it tastes good, he will also stay and drink it. It's really a good life. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Walton couldn't help but curl her lips. She accelerated and overtook Jiang Hai, heading toward the wine manor in the distance. Jiang Hai had to change his route and followed her to the winery. When Jiang Hai and the others arrived, the head of the winery, Dulles Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements of the grapevine to Aphrodite and the others. For those who grew plants, pruning was essential. When pruning the branches, you need to pay attention to it. Don't cut the head, but cut the other side branches. This way, the nutrients won't be absorbed by the other side branches. More nutrients will be supplied to the main grapes. When Jiang Hai and the others arrived, the head of Jiang Hai's winery, Dulles Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements to Aphrodite and the others. Because if left alone, these grapes will grow into a bunch of grapes on each branch, but the nutrients that the earth can give are limited, especially when Jiang Hai does not allow pesticides and fertilizers. If a bunch of grapevines grows dozens of bunches of grapes, then most of the grapes will not be able to grow. Not only does this consume time, but it also consumes a lot of the fertility of the land, so whether it is planting grapes or vegetables. These old people all have a way to distinguish which are the main places to grow and which are not. If they are not the main branches, they must be pruned to ensure the supply of nutrients to the main branches. This is the inevitable effect of planting grapes. And Aphrodite Arnold, Dinah Taylor, and the others also listened very seriously. Ever since Jiang Hai's rebirth, these women's feelings for Jiang Hai are slowly fermenting, especially under Aphrodite's bewitchment. Almost all of these women's dream lover looks like Jiang Hai. Chapter 258. Maybe it was because of the principles of education they had received before, or maybe it was because they had a good impression of Jiang Hai. In their opinion, Jiang Hai was so good to them that they had no other choice but to give themselves to him. But a few days ago, when they deliberately wanted to give the most important thing they had regained to Jiang Hai did not want it. This made these girls feel a little sad, but at the same time, they felt that they had not misjudged him. As Jiang Hai began to focus more of his attention on the herd of cows, they also temporarily extinguished such thoughts. Of course, if possible, they were still willing to give themselves to Jiang Hai. But when Jiang Hai did not want them, their main job was to learn how to grow wine and how to make it. Dulles Gerard was also very happy to have a group of beautiful, studious, and beautiful apprentices. So recently, he had been teaching very hard. It could be said that he had taught them everything he knew. This made O'Connor Murphy, who was his assistant, a little confused. When O'Connor was learning skills, 90% of the time, he was secretly learning from others. In this way, Dulles Gerard was still unwilling to teach some things, but he was very happy to teach these girls. But as a German, his spirit was extremely tenacious. He did not show any fluctuations. Instead, he continued to do his work strictly and seriously. Just as Dulles Gerard was teaching these girls, Jiang Hai and Prawalton's four-wheeled motorcycle also drove to the side of the winery. The movement of the motorcycle attracted everyone's attention. When they saw that Jiang Hai had come, the girls who were still surrounding Dulles Gerard immediately stood up and rushed to Jiang Hai's side. As for Prawalton and Selena Gomez, they were temporarily ignored. They did not care about the women around Jiang Hai. If there was a need, they could help Jiang Hai find them. You are amazing. There are so many beauties here. Is your winery really used for making wine? Looking at these youthful beauties, Prawalton's eyes suddenly lit up. She looked at Jiang Hai with surprise, but her eyes kept glancing at these girls. She had to admit that the quality of these girls was definitely very high in her opinion. They were quite good-looking, and it could be said that none of them were ugly. In addition, after being transformed by Jiang Hai's spirit energy, they had white and delicate skin and big watery eyes. Because of the labor, their bodies had become tighter and tighter. As soon as they walked over, they gave off a very healthy sense of beauty. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai had repaired their bodies. So now, their bodies were so healthy that Prawalton could not take her eyes off of them. Of course, it's for making wine. These girls have some very bad pasts, but they have been reborn with me." Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai glanced at her. He was a gentleman, and he had never touched these girls. "It's too wasteful. Beauties, we are going to the beach to play. Do you want to come with us?" Looking at these girls in front of her, Prawalton's expression changed and said with envy. However, when the girls heard that they were going to play, they first glanced at Jiang Hai. Seeing Jiang Hai's indifferent look, the girls also looked at Dulles Gerard. The old man was soon defeated by the girls' eyes. He could not help but clap his hands and stand up. "You have learned enough these days. Take half a day off. Tomorrow, you will start pruning the branches." Hearing Dulles Gerard's words, the girls could not help but laugh silently. Then, they high-fived each other and looked at Jiang Hai with longing. "Then go back and change your clothes. You can come by yourself later. You can drive that F-750. Looking at the girl's longing eyes, Jiang Hai also smiled. He would not stop the girls from coming to play, especially when they were not too busy. As long as they could do their job, Jiang Hai was still very good to his subordinates. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls cheered silently. Although they could now speak very slowly like Delina and Marion, in order not to appear too sudden, Jiang Hai only told the people in the manner that he was treating these girls, but he did not say the specific extent of the treatment. At least, he would only show it after some time. After all, this kind of medical skill is really a little scary. If it is exposed, it will not be good for Jiang Hai. Young bodies. Should we wait for them or go first? Looking at the girls leaving here happily, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with envy. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai was a little uncertain about what this woman was going to do. "Let's go first." However, not knowing what she was going to do did not prevent Jiang Hai from doing business with her. After saying politely, Jiang Hai turned the steering wheel and rushed in the direction of the beach. As for Prawalton and Selena Gomez, who had not spoken much since they arrived here, they also followed Jiang Hai to the beach. Not long after, the three had already arrived at the beach where Jiang Hai lived. The moment they stepped on the beach, Selena Gomez, who had not spoken until now, couldn't help but exclaim softly. Her scream and the roar of the beach motorcycle also alarmed Edouard Anderson and the other fishermen who were preparing to go out to sea in the fishing port in the distance. "Hey, boss, are you going out to sea?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over on the motorcycle, Edouard Anderson couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at Prawalton. In fact, it was mainly up to her to decide what to do. "No, let's just play on the shore. The sea is not so friendly." When talking about this matter, Prawalton seemed to have returned to her queen-like state. She glanced at Jiang Hai with a cold and arrogant face and said lightly, "No, let's just play on the beach." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't say much and just said to Ai Dehua. Then the three of them rode the motorcycle and came to a more remote beach in the distance. Jiang Hai's manor was originally bought by a rich man for vacation, so whether it was the environment or the location, it was quite good. In front of them was a half-moon-shaped bay. A few white clouds floated in the blue sky. Below the white clouds was the same blue sea. Behind this bay, half of it was a green grassland, and the other half was a forest. It blocked the invasion of the sea breeze. Therefore, when driving on the grassland, one might feel that the wind was a little strong, about level 3 or 4. But on this beach, the wind was weak, about level 1 or 2 breeze. At this time of the year, it was very comfortable to blow on one's body. The beach on the coast was not open to outsiders, so whether it was the water quality or the beach, it was not polluted. There was not even a piece of garbage to be found. On the beach, there was a very good sand. The only thing that would hurt one's feet might be the shells or small crabs in the sand. There were not even any big stones here. One had to admit that this was a very beautiful place. After stopping the motorcycle, the two women also got off the motorcycle. They looked at the blue sea in front of them and stretched. It's really beautiful here, and it's very quiet. Selena Gomez ran her fingers through her hair. She wasn't in a good mood at first, but after seeing the beautiful scenery in front of her, she seemed to have calmed down a lot. Since you are here to have fun, don't think about those things. According to the words of Jiang Hai's country, there will be a way out when the car reaches the mountain. It's useless for you to worry here. How about I help you? Whether it's your music or that little bastard, I can help you settle it. Prawalton also combed her hair, which was messed up by the sea breeze, and slowly walked to Selena Gomez's back. She slowly wrapped her arms around Selena Gomez's back. Just like that, the two women stood on the beach, hugging each other. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was stunned. What the hell is this? Is this the legendary lace? Boss, I'm here to bring you a deck chair. Just when Jiang Hai could neither advance nor retreat, and the scene was divided into two, one side was very sweet, the other was very awkward, Edward Anderson came to save Jiang Hai. Because Jiang Hai said that he did not want to go out to sea and wanted to have fun here, Edward Anderson thought that Jiang Hai would not just sit on the beach with the two girls, so he just happened to have a few deck chairs in the dock. These were made in the winter when he and Luo Binci were bored. These deck chairs were not as beautiful as those in tourist destinations, but they were sturdy. Although the white wooden deck chairs were not as beautiful, they still looked good. Together with a box of beer, a box of drinks, and a sun umbrella, it really did look like something. Hearing his voice, Jiang Hai immediately went to take these things back, and Selena Gomez also reacted. She immediately broke free from Prawalton's arms and walked toward Jiang Hai. Prawalton looked at Jiang Hai with some annoyance, and she gently curled her lips, but still walked over. The two women only helped to carry some light things, such as deck chairs, sun umbrellas, drinks, beer, and the like. Naturally, it was Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson who carried them. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua went back to the dock. Because don't forget, it was not just the three of them here, Aphrodite and the others would also come later. While Jiang Hai was busy here, a taxi had already driven into Winthrop's territory. Chapter 259. What's the situation with these girls? Half lying on the wide recliner, Selena Gomez whispered to Jiang Hai beside her. Jiang Hai was also lying there, looking at the girls in the distance, including Prawalton, who was enjoying it. He took a sip of beer and slowly explained. These girls actually came from a bitter background. They used to be deaf and mute. Because they were misled by bad people, they went on the wrong path. Fortunately, I found them, and then I hired them to help me grow grapes. Jiang Hai didn't finish the details. The dark history of these girls, it's enough for them to know. There's no need to spread it everywhere. This is not his style. So that's the case. I was wondering why they didn't talk or laugh. It turns out that there's such a story. I didn't know that you were a good person. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. She propped herself up, picked up a bottle of guarana next to her, opened it, and drank it. At the same time, she looked at Jiang Hai with a funny face. Jiang Hai also curled his lips and said helplessly. Good person is not a word that should be used to praise a man, at least in Wuxia, this is not a good word. Why? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but have some doubts. Good man, shouldn't this be a good word? Well, think about it, when you reject your pursuers, what do you usually say? Looking at Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai guided her to understand the meaning of the word good person. Well, let me think about it. If it was a few years ago, I would say that I am still young and I am not ready to date others. If it was a few years ago, I might say that I have a boyfriend. If it was in the past 2 years, I might say that I want to put more energy into my career. Well, that's it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez really thought about it seriously and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her answer, Jiang Hai was shocked again. That's fine, okay. I thought you would say, sorry, you are a good person, but we are not suitable for each other. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said helplessly. In fact, this is the real meaning of a good person. Ha ha ha, that's something only aunties in their 30s or 40s would say. We don't know how to say that. Wow, your guarana is really strong. It makes me want to exercise. Do you want to try it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help shaking her head and said. She really didn't expect the answer to be so simple, but after laughing for a while, she found that she was really a little hot, so she couldn't help but sit up and said to Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai usually goes down the mountain every day. Today, he doesn't want to go into the water again. Because as long as he goes into the water, the big idiot in the water will definitely come looking for him. When that time comes, there will be a shark swimming to the shore. These women probably won't dare to play anymore. So for their sake, Jiang Hai shook his head and refused her kindness. No need, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to go into the water, Selena Gomez didn't care. She stood up from the recliner and took off the slightly thick sweater she was wearing. Since they are going to the beach to play, although they don't know if they can go into the water, these girls are already prepared. At this time, on the row of recliners, there is a pile of clothes on each recliner. These are the clothes that the girls took off. They didn't wear underwear inside, but they wore bikinis directly. Selena Gomez did the same. As she took off her sweater, a bikini top that was almost the same as her underwear appeared in front of Jiang Hai. On the left and right sides of the bikini top, there were 2 US flags printed on it. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. Is this patriotism or not? It's also difficult for him to understand. However, Selena Gomez is a public figure after all. She is used to being stared at like this, so she is not embarrassed. After taking off her top, she took off her tight jeans, and then 2 pieces of cloth and 2 straps appeared in front of Jiang Hai's eyes. Well, this is the first time Jiang Hai saw this thing with his own eyes. Are you really not going to swim? Feeling that Jiang Hai's eyes were fixed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. Although this is only the 3rd time she and Jiang Hai have met, the open atmosphere of the UA made her not mind Jiang Hai's gaze. Of course, if she wants to go further, it is probably impossible, but it doesn't matter if she let Jiang Hai's eyes take advantage of her. On the contrary, this will be regarded as a display of her own charm. Oh, no. After all, Jiang Hai is still inexperienced. He clearly gave up on such a great opportunity to take advantage of her. Hearing that Jiang Hai decided not to go down, Selena also raised her eyebrows, then walked to the beach with a smile and joined Aphrodite and the others who were still playing by the beach. As for Pra Walton, at this time, she was also fighting with the group of girls. She didn't have the cold and domineering female CEO feeling that Jiang Hai saw her for the first and second time. I don't know if this guy has schizophrenia. Why does she change so quickly? It's impossible to guard against her. But these clothes are pretty good. Jiang Hai picked up the beer next to him, took a sip, and said with some satisfaction. At this time, these girls were playing on the beach. Naturally, it was impossible for them to wear ordinary clothes when playing on the beach. Therefore, at this time, these girls were all wearing swimming clothes. In the UA, except for elementary school students, very few people would buy one-piece swimsuits. He had to admit that these women's swimsuits were very good. Aphrodite and the others had never bought these things before, so when they bought, they consulted Mrs. Philemon and the others, and Mrs. Philemon and the others were all housewives. Naturally, they wouldn't play too wild. Therefore, although they bought bikinis, they were all very conservative. They were of the same color, or there were some stripes on it, such as checks and so on. At first glance, it was a very conservative style. Although it was called a bikini, it was very thick. Among these women's swimsuits, the most eye-catching one was Pra Walton's black one. In addition to the 2 pieces of black fabric in front of the top, there were only 2 pieces of black fabric on the bottom, one in front and one behind. The rest of the body was covered by metal rings, revealing a large area of skin. He had to admit that Pra Walton did have the capital. Her upper body was indeed big, surprisingly big. The demeanor of a mature woman really could kill these little girls around her, but she also maintained her skin very well. Her skin was white and tender, and her figure was also very good. She didn't have the feeling of a foreign woman who was beautiful before 30 and had to call her dad after 30. Looking at these people playing around, Jiang Hai was also very happy. At least he was very satisfied with this scene. As for Selena Gomez, who was still a little unhappy, she also smiled at this time. In this place where no one knew who she was, or even if someone knew who she was, they wouldn't care. She was really happy. The unhappiness caused by her work and her wrong love life had disappeared. Looking at her happy face, Pra Walton was also very happy. It seemed that it was very wise to bring her here this time. Just as everyone was playing happily, a taxi stopped at the gate of Jiang Hai's manor. The doorbell rang. Because only Delina and Marion were in Jiang Hai's house, the 2 girls didn't dare to open the door easily, so they transferred the call to Mrs. Philemon's house. Hello. As the call was transferred, Mrs. Philemon's face also appeared in front of the screen at the door. In her sight, 2 Asian faces also appeared in front of her. Hello, is this Jiang Hai's house? Looking at the middle-aged woman in front of them, the 2 women were stunned for a moment, but the woman with a strong aura quickly reacted and asked in very pure English. Jiang Hai? The boss? He's not in the villa right now. Why are you looking for him? Hearing the 2 women's words, Mrs. Philemon realized that they had come to see the proprietor. That was right. He's not in the villa. Then may I ask, where is he? I called him, but he didn't pick up, so I came here directly. I'm a good friend of his in China. Hearing Mrs. Philemon's words, the woman frowned and asked doubtfully. Oh, he's now accompanying a guest on the beach by the sea. The signal there is indeed a little weak. How about this, please wait a moment, I'll ask them to send you there. Hearing that the 2 women were Jiang Hai's friends in China, Mrs. Philemon didn't doubt them. After all, this was their own manor. If anyone dared to harm Jiang Hai, they would be courting death. What's more, in Mrs. Philemon's opinion, the 2 women didn't seem to be bad people. At least, they didn't seem to be a threat. With their small arms and legs, they might not be able to beat her. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone, then spoke to Mrs. Philemon through the walkie-talkie. At this time, Mrs. Philemon and the others were herding cattle on the grassland, so the only place that was free was the winery. After hearing this, although he was a little dissatisfied that his work was interrupted, the only one who was free, Connor Murphy, still drove a large 4-wheeled motorcycle to the door. From afar, he saw the 2 women carrying 2 boxes standing at the gate of the manor. Chapter 260. President Xi, are all the people in the United States so rude? They didn't even invite us in to have a seat. Seeing Mrs. Philemon directly hang up the TV, a woman who looked younger than her, who had been standing behind the woman, said with an unhappy expression. Hearing the girl's words, the woman standing in front chuckled, "You don't understand. The people in the United States take their private property very seriously. If there is no search warrant, these people won't let you in, even the police won't be able to enter. If the police dare to enter, they can even shoot in self-defense. Compared to the assistant behind her, the woman in front obviously knew more than her. After all, she had been here for many years. Barbaric country. Hearing the woman in front say that the people here even dared to hit the police, she couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. At least such a thing has never been heard of in China. Are the domestic police so easy to mess with? Seeing that the girl behind her finally shut her mouth, the woman standing in front couldn't help but laugh. In fact, what she said was mostly an exaggeration. If the United States was really so lawless, then there wouldn't be so many people who wanted to come here every year. It wasn't so easy to do well here. After waiting here for about 5 minutes, a large four-wheeled motorcycle that could seat 4 people drove to the door. As the door was opened, Connor Murphy's 5 views, which were obviously unique to the Germanic people, appeared in front of the 2 women. "Hello, are you the boss you're looking for? Get in the car." Glancing at the 2, Connor Murphy said calmly. "Wow, Caucasian uncle, you look so handsome." Hearing her words, the assistant's eyes couldn't help but light up. A young girl like her likes these mature uncles the most. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. "Sorry to trouble you." Fortunately, the assistant spoke in Chinese, so the white man couldn't understand. After the woman standing in front kicked her, she said in fluent English. Then the 2 put the luggage on the four-wheeled motorcycle. Then, the man started the car and drove them to the beach in the distance. Along the way, the 2 women sitting in the car had been looking at the scenery here. They had to admit that the scenery in Jianghai's manor was really beautiful. If they used some high-resolution cameras to take pictures, they could even use it as a desktop without any repair. The blue sky, the white clouds, the blue sea, the neatly arranged villas, the small villas, and the flocks of cattle and sheep that could be seen in the distance, and the forest at the edge. Such a scene was not an exaggeration to say that it was a painting. This Jianghai really knows how to enjoy life. No wonder he's unwilling to return to China. Looking at the scene before her, the assistant couldn't help but mutter softly. Upon hearing her words, the woman beside her nodded in agreement. In fact, she understood Jianghai a little. Such a good place was indeed much more comfortable than staying in the country. However, as the four-wheeled motorcycle continued to move forward, the expressions of the 2 who originally wanted to enjoy the scenery gradually changed. The assistant gently nudged the woman beside her with the tip of her elbow and asked in a low voice, "President Xi, is this place Jianghai's?" "Maybe." However, the woman wasn't very sure. She had heard that Jianghai's territory wasn't small, but she didn't expect it to be this big. It was beyond her expectations. She didn't expect Jianghai's territory to be this big. Just when they were wondering how big Jianghai's manor was, they finally reached the end. The originally endless grassland had reached its limit at this time. Looking around, the grassland was replaced by the blue ocean in the distance and the golden beach beside it. In the middle of the beach and the ocean, there was a large dock. At this time, not only were there several houses built on the dock, but there were also many boats, big boats, small boats, fishing boats, and all kinds of boats. When they were dozens of meters away from the dock, Connor Murphy, who was driving in front, couldn't help but slow down, and then shouted in the direction of the huts on the dock, "Hey, Ai Dehua, is the boss still there?" Probably hearing his voice, a very strong man came out of the room. When he saw the 3 people here, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. "Hey, Connor, the boss is still there. Who are you?" "I'm the boss's friend in Wuxia. I'll send them there first." After responding to Ai Dehua, Connor Murphy stepped on the accelerator, and the motorcycle also rushed to the other side of the beach. After about 5 minutes, some figures in the distance and the reclining chairs on the shore entered the eyes of these 3 people. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look over here, but when he saw the people riding the motorcycle, he was stunned. He was not surprised by Connor Murphy's arrival, but he was surprised by the two people behind him. And just when Jiang Hai was surprised, the two people here had already taken a car and came to a place not far from Jiang Hai. When they saw the scene on the beach, the faces of these two people were also a little strange. The assistant's face was ugly, and the woman's face, which was originally livid, seemed to have become even more livid. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up to greet them, Connor also slowly slowed down in front of Jiang Hai. "Boss, they said they were your friends in Wuxia, so I brought them here first." Looking at Jiang Hai's strange gaze, Connor Murphy, a strict German, also felt that something seemed to be wrong. Did he bring the wrong people? But since he had already brought them here, he could only bite the bullet and say to Jiang Hai. But after listening to his words, Jiang Hai's look became even stranger. "Friends? I thought we would be enemies when we meet again. I don't like to make enemies easily. It seems that you didn't take what I said to you to heart. You even had so much fun." Casually getting off the dune motorcycle, the woman and her attendant walked in front of Jiang Hai. This woman, at this time, probably someone had already guessed her origin. After all, there were only two women named President Qi in Jiang Hai's memory. One was already dead. If she came to him now, he would probably be scared to death. The other one was the most familiar stranger on the surface, Qi Li, President Qi. Yes, the person who appeared in front of Jiang Hai at this time was not someone else, but the most controversial Qi Li, and her little assistant. "What can I do for you?" Seeing that Qi Li's eyes skipped over him and focused on the women who were playing in the distance, Jiang Hai frowned with some doubts. He really didn't think that he and Qi Li could be considered friends. After all, on the day of the new year, the two broke up completely. Jiang Hai had already expressed his attitude. He was definitely going to divorce this marriage. Even if he had to give up half of his manor, he must divorce her. "I came to talk to you. Why? Am I not welcome, or do you really want to give me half of the manor? I just looked around when I came. Your place is not small." Smiling at Jiang Hai, Qi Li first turned her head and looked at Connor Murphy. She thanked him in English, then ignored her luggage and walked directly past Jiang Hai to the seat in the distance. As for the little attendant behind her, he also hurried to follow. At this time, the German also felt that the atmosphere seemed to be a bit wrong. Although he was a strict German, he still liked the job and the manor, so he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai and Qi Li both spoke in Mandarin. He couldn't understand, so he could only stand aside. "It's okay, I do recognize them. They are my friends. As for their luggage, put it in my villa first. We'll talk about it when I go back." Looking at Connor's confused look, Jiang Hai smiled. This German also knew that he was going to ruin things. But there was no way to blame him for this. After all, they didn't know Qi Li and didn't know the story between him and Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Connor Murphy did not feel like he was granted amnesty, it was almost the same. He immediately turned the corner and rushed in the direction of Jiang Hai's villa with the two people's luggage. At this time, the two went straight to the row of reclining chairs, picked two and sat down, but the position they sat in happened to be the position of Walton and Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez didn't care. Although she became famous at a young age, it was not to the extent that others couldn't sit on the chair she sat on. However, Walton was a little surprised. Although she showed her silly and sweet side now, people who really knew her were very familiar with her. She could be the least favored daughter in the Walton family, and she snatched the position of the president of Sam's Club in Walmart without relying on men. How could she be silly, naive, and sweet? She had already sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere when the two of them arrived. There might be telepathy between strong women. When she saw Qi Li for the first time, she knew that this girl was definitely not a good person like herself. Qi Li was like a fierce tiger that broke into her territory. How could Pra Walton retreat? Everyone knew that a female tiger was fiercer than a tiger. At this time, seeing the two people sitting in her seat, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but raise slightly. She left the crowd and walked over. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked over and stood in front of the two people. "Tell me, why did you come back to me?" Every time he saw Qi Li, Jiang Hai found it difficult to maintain his calm. "Can't I come to you if there's nothing?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyebrows raised, and her slender eyebrows also raised. "Don't say these useless things." As soon as he heard Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was a little impatient. "Hey, Jiang, do you have guests again?" But before he finished speaking, Pra Walton's voice behind him interrupted him. Chapter 261. Pra Walton's words were very interesting. For Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they had different meanings. For Jiang Hai, there were indeed guests again. Because the first guests were Pra Walton and Selena Gomez. They didn't know Qi Li, so naturally, there were guests again. But in Qi Li's ears, these words were a bit of a demonstration. Clearly, they didn't treat Jiang Hai as an outsider. That was why they said there were guests again. They treated Jiang Hai as their own territory. "Jiang Hai, we can talk about our business when we have time." "Who is this? Why don't you introduce her to me?" Looking at the woman in front of her, Qi Li also sat up straight. She was originally sitting on the recliner without anything to lean on, but her back was straight. Her arrogant appearance was like a peacock. She squinted her eyes and exuded an imposing manner to Pra Walton in front of her. "This is Pra Walton. He came to buy my cattle. This is Qi Li. She is Wuxia's friend." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also felt that he shouldn't wash his dirty linen in public. Jiang Hai didn't want to let everyone know the story between him and Qi Li, so it was better to stop fighting temporarily at this time. Looking at Qi Li and Pra Walton, Jiang Hai introduced them in English. "Walton? Walmart's family?" Compared to Jiang Hai, who didn't find out anything after he came back, Qi Li was more capable than him. As soon as she heard this surname, she had already reacted immediately and asked with some surprise. "Oh? You know me? Hello." Hearing that Qi Li knew her surname, Pra Walton chuckled. She didn't mind Jiang Hai saying that she was here to buy cattle. Indeed, she was here to buy cattle. However, her eyes kept glancing at Jiang Hai and Lu Li. Her sixth sense told her that there must be a story between these two guys. Even Jiang Hai was a little afraid of this woman, which made her more interested in the story. Although she had only met Jiang Hai 3 times, she had some understanding of him. This guy was a reckless and overconfident maniac. When he didn't understand the rules of the New York beef show, he dared to spend more than $1 million to participate. Fortunately, he won in the end and made a name for himself. However, only they knew how lucky they were. If it wasn't for Selena Gomez, if it wasn't for her, then Jiang Hai wouldn't even be able to pass the first round. Although his beef was indeed good, his confidence was a little too much. At the same time, this guy was also a reckless person. It was rare to see someone wearing outdoor clothing to participate in the NBA All-Star reception. It was this kind of person who had 2 personalities. The first impression he gave people was that he was stubborn, and the second impression was that he was stubborn. As long as he set his mind on something, then he would definitely do it. This was also called bigotry. It was hard to imagine that such a person would have anything to be afraid of. However, it was clear that this woman named Qi Li gave Jiang Hai a very dangerous signal. This made him constantly on guard against her, which made her very interested in Qi Li. "Hello, you are the famous Walton family and the Walmart Group. How could I not know? However, I am a little surprised. If you are just here to buy beef, then you don't have to come here personally to buy it. Although Qi felt a little pressured by the other party's identity, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. She straightened her clothes and spoke to Walton with a serious face. If it was ordinary beef, then I naturally wouldn't have to come here personally. However, your friend's beef is not ordinary beef. If I didn't come here personally to inspect it, I think our group wouldn't be at ease. After hearing Qi's words, Walton also spoke lightly. Although the two of them spoke very softly at this time. There was also a smile on his face, but Jiang Hai, who had been standing between the two of them, felt that the weather had begun to heat up for no reason. What's going on? If this was the world of anime at this time, the sky would probably be cut open by this momentum. Of course, this was just Jiang Hai's imagination. Then the two of them spoke one after another. Although they were smiling like flowers, there was a sense of tit-for-tat between their words. Jiang Hai wanted to interrupt several times, but just as he opened his mouth, the two of them had already started talking fiercely. In terms of momentum, she really crushed Jiang Hai dozens of times, but what also surprised Jiang Hai was that Qi didn't fall behind. After all, Walton's strength was there. In the Walmart family, she was able to manage Sam's Club alone. From this, it can be seen that this woman was definitely not simple. However, Qi only took over the family company for a year. In a year's time, she was able to be on par with Walton, which really surprised Jiang Hai. Hey, Jiang Hai, your sea is so beautiful, there are so many animals, have you ever thought of developing it as a tourist area? At this time, suddenly, Selena Gomez in the distance ran over with a sea urchin in her hand. Just now, she took advantage of the fact that everyone was playing and snorkeling in the sea. The sun penetrated the sea and shone on the shallows. When people dive underwater, the colorful coral reefs and dreamy marine life will surprise them. But unfortunately, although Selena Gomez can swim, her swimming skills are not good. At least she can't catch fish with her hands, so in the end, she only picked up a sea urchin and floated up. But don't get me wrong, people in Europe and the United States don't eat this sea urchin. This sea urchin is actually used to feed lobsters and crabs in the sea. Of course, some more precious fish, such as parrotfish, will also eat this thing. However, on Jiang Hai's coast, this thing is really too much, even Jiang Hai doesn't like to eat it. You don't like to eat this thing, do you? Looking at Selena Gomez, who came over with a sea urchin, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Of course, no, I like to eat meat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand to deny it. By the way, it's almost dark. What do you want to eat? I'll get it for you. But her words made Jiang Hai slap his forehead. Originally, he was a little overwhelmed here. Now that Qi is here, he probably won't have the time and opportunity to watch the girls play. Instead, it's better to leave here and find something to eat. I came here to check your beef, of course I want to eat beef. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Walton said with a smile. No problem, what about you? Seeing that Walton has already ordered, Jiang Hai also looked at the others. I've been on a diet recently. Although the beef is good, the calories are still a bit high. It would be better if there is fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. As a public figure, she naturally needs to control her body shape. Meat is not something that can be eaten casually. I don't care. When it comes to Qi is also a bachelor. To be honest, she doesn't know what Jiang Hai has here, so she said very indifferently. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai can't help but curl his lips. Indifference is actually the most difficult thing to accept. Okay, then you can rest here first. In a while, you can take my four-wheeled motorcycle back. Aphrodite and the others know the way, I'll get you something to eat. At the moment, Jiang Hai didn't say much and directly turned around and ran toward the distant dock. After Jiang Hai turned around and left, the two women who had been talking happily when Jiang Hai was still here, suddenly stopped talking. At this moment, Pra Walton pointed at her clothes on the recliner. Qi Li naturally knew what she meant, but she didn't move away and just sat on the side. Seeing Qi Li's movement, Pra Walton also chuckled, picked up her clothes and towel, and directly lay on Jiang Hai's recliner. Then, the two of them, one lying down and one sitting, motionlessly looked at the blue sky, white clouds, blue sea, and golden beach. This atmosphere made Selena Gomez a little uncomfortable. She quickly returned to Aphrodite's side and played with the girls. As for Qi Li's assistant, she wasn't so lucky. She could only stand beside Qi Li. Although it was very comfortable here, the pressure in front of the two tigresses, oh no, the strong women, made her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to care about this little assistant. In fact, even if he could, he was too lazy to care. After all, the person who despised him the most was this woman. Jiang Hai felt very comfortable letting her suffer. When they arrived at the dock, Jiang Hai steered a boat and left the dock. After arriving at the junction of the coral reef and the fish farm, Jiang Hai took off his clothes and dived into the sea. As Jiang Hai dived into the water, a black figure quickly swam over. Ever since Jiang Hai leveled up, he wasn't as cautious about using the spiritual energy in the scales as he was in the beginning. These days, in addition to using the spiritual energy in the scales for his pets, Little Yellow, Xiaobai, Chirp, Bucktooth, and Little Xia, he also gave Big Fool, his bodyguard, 2 extra pieces of spiritual energy. Once these 2 pieces of spiritual energy were injected, Big Fool's IQ and size were now rising in a straight line. The sand tiger shark, which was originally only 4 or 5 meters long, had grown to more than 8 meters long at this time, which was longer than the average great white shark. However, because of the transformation of spiritual energy, its teeth were sharper, faster, and stronger. Even if it really encountered a great white shark, it could still teach the great white shark a lesson. At this time, in the sea, the only thing that could compete with it might be the killer whale. It wasn't because the killer whale was strong, but because it was a group of creatures. Jiang Hai patted its head. He didn't have time to play with it today. He paddled and dived into the deep sea. Chapter 262. Bang! With a splash of water, Jiang Hai also dived into the water. Big Idiot sensed his presence and immediately swam over to him from his territory. The way it shook its head and wagged its tail did look a little scary, but Jiang Hai knew very well that this guy was actually acting cute. It was hard to understand how a shark would act cute, but it did look scary. Pointing at the bottom of the sea, Jiang Hai grabbed Big Idiot's dorsal fin with both hands. As Big Idiot swung its tail, it instantly dived into the depths of the sea at a speed much faster than Jiang Hai's swimming speed. When it was about to reach the bottom, Jiang Hai let go of his hand and landed on the seabed. The fine sand on the seabed sank a lot when Jiang Hai stepped on it. Some flatfish that were originally hiding in the sand nearby immediately swam away after sensing Jiang Hai's presence. As for Jiang Hai, he stabilized his body and walked towards the coral reef. There are some dangers in the coral reefs. For example, there are some silly eels, silly sea snakes, sea anemones, poisonous fish, jellyfish, and the like. All of them are very dangerous. However, Jiang Hai already had some understanding of these dangers. At least, he cherishes his life, so he wouldn't play around with his own life. The marine resources in Jiang Hai's territory were indeed quite rich. Whether it was fish, shellfish, lobsters, or crabs, if he wanted to eat them himself, he wouldn't be able to finish them in his lifetime. But if he caught them and sold them, it would definitely not be enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't intend to touch the coral reef. This area was also considered his conservation area. If there were any precious fish species in the future, he could breed them here. As for the outer sea, it was for breeding the economic fish. After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai counted the people who would be eating dinner tonight. Although Aphrodite and the others were playing here, they would probably have to go back when it was time for dinner. That meant that the people eating at his house would be himself, Delina, Marion, Prawalton, Selena Gomez, Chi Li, and her little assistant. Well, actually, the assistant couldn't be blamed for looking down on Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also looked down on her. Even now, Jiang Hai still didn't know her name. There are a total of 7 people. In addition to steak, I'll get some fish, abalones, sea cucumbers, and lobsters. Forget about crabs. After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai took out the knife at his waist and headed for the coral reef. In fact, abalones were very easy to breed, especially when the seawater was very clear. Breeding abalones basically required a lot of seaweed, rich bait, clear water early, stable seawater density, rocks on the bottom, no industrial pollution in the sea area, and fewer hostile creatures. It wouldn't be frozen in winter, so it was best to breed abalones in a frozen place. The temperature requirements for this thing weren't too high. For example, the Bohai Bend and the Huanghai Bay near Lu Province could also be bred. To be honest, the temperature in Boston was much warmer than the Bohai Bay in China. The highest temperature in summer didn't exceed 30 degrees, and the coldest time in winter didn't exceed -10 degrees. It was basically about the same as in Lu Province. It was a good place to breed abalones. However, it was still the same saying. In fact, people in Europe and America weren't very interested in abalones. Take the most famous Australian abalones for example. In fact, the locals didn't eat them very much. In some public beaches, you could go into the water and catch them to eat. Of course, if you wanted to take them away, you had to limit the number of abalones. Basically, each person could only take a few abalones. It was okay to take them back for fun, but it wasn't good to eat them. In some protected parks and lakes in Australia, these large abalones could grow to 3 or even 2 heads. However, they weren't allowed to be harvested, but the locals didn't eat them either. Raising lobsters in the United States could make money, but raising abalones? You'll lose a lot of money. Prawalton naturally didn't come here to eat abalones. However, in China, abalones were still quite popular. The average size sold for about 20 renminbi each, and the seaside sold for about 10 renminbi. The large ones that Jiang Hai picked could be sold for a few hundred RMB per kilogram at the seaside in China. It was naturally more expensive if he went to a restaurant. The reason why he picked these abalones wasn't because he didn't want to show off. He just wanted to tell Chi Li, don't think that he, Jiang Hai, is not doing well abroad. He is doing much better here than you. The blue sky, white clouds, no pressure, lobsters, steaks, and large abalones couldn't be enjoyed in China. With this kind of mood, Jiang Hai soon scooped up about 20 abalones from the reef in front of him. Although abalones were the most abundant in the Pacific Ocean, followed by the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't a problem to get hundreds or thousands of abalones in such a big sea. What? Arctic Ocean? Sorry, there wasn't any abalones there. Jiang Hai quickly picked up more than 20 abalones, then swam to the depths and grabbed some lobsters. Lobsters and abalones were the same. Their size determined their fate. The large ones were naturally very expensive, and the small ones weren't worth much. Lobsters that weighed about 2 to 3 kilograms were only around 10 renminbi per kilogram here. Sometimes, one could even buy a kilogram for less than 10 renminbi. Jiang Hai wanted to show off and treat people, so he naturally couldn't get ordinary lobsters. Therefore, he specially picked 2 large ones. Boston lobsters might not be as big as Australian lobsters, but the meat of Boston lobsters was much thicker than that of Australian lobsters. The meat in the 2 big pincers was extraordinarily thick, and the taste was naturally excellent. Jiang Hai picked 2 lobsters that weighed about 10 kilograms and held them in his hands. They weighed about 12 to 1.5 kilograms and were more than 1 meter long. In the sea, they were definitely big monsters. Compared to abalones, lobsters were much more abundant in this sea area. Most of them were wild, and some of them were shrimp seedlings that Jiang Hai threw away. Because Jiang Hai injected spirit energy into them before throwing them away, almost none of them died of illness. Of course, those that were eaten were counted separately, but this was also considered the survival of the fittest in nature. After catching the abalones and lobsters, Jiang Hai picked up some sea cucumbers from the bottom of the sea. There were really a lot of sea cucumbers at the bottom of the sea. Jiang Hai casually picked a dozen big ones, then gestured to Big Idiot, who was hovering above his head in the distance. Big Idiot quickly swam towards the depths of the coral reef. After a few seconds, the originally quiet coral reef suddenly became lively. Big Idiot was chasing a big fish at this time and was rushing towards Jiang Hai. However, it was obvious that the fish in front of Big Idiot wasn't swimming fast. The reason why Big Idiot didn't catch it was to let Jiang Hai catch it. It couldn't be helped. Although Jiang Hai wasn't afraid of water at this time, it didn't mean that he could catch the fish in the water. At least, it was still difficult for him to catch most of the fish with his bare hands. But Big Idiot didn't care, he could catch it. When the fish swam not far from Jiang Hai had already stretched out his hand. Although he couldn't chase Jiang Hai in a straight line, he could catch it with his hands. Jiang Hai's right thumb, index finger, and middle finger instantly grabbed the fish's gills and mouth. The fish was already in his hands. After getting it, Jiang Hai observed the fish. This was a spotted grouper, which was originally distributed in tropical waters, both in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The largest body length was 1 meter. It mainly lived along the rocky reef areas where the water quality was relatively turbid, but it was often found in the soda water area. It was fierce and belonged to the ambush-type fish. It was very popular in China. Originally, it was rare in the Atlantic region of the United States. To be precise, in the Atlantic Ocean, even groupers were rare. But in recent years, there had been a lot of breeding. Although it wasn't to the extent that you could see fish in the cold zone of the tropics, fish in the cold zone of the tropics were still quite common. The spotted grouper caught by Jiang Hai was about 80 centimeters long. It was indeed not a small fish. Jiang Hai glanced at his watch. It wasn't his Patek Philippe anymore. That watch was good, but it wouldn't work in the water. It could only withstand up to 30 meters of water. Therefore, Jiang Hai deliberately bought a diving watch. This one was much cheaper. Rolex, well, it was actually cheap, but it was only compared to Jiang Hai's original watch. Rolex DPSEA, Deep Sea, with a maximum diving depth of 3,900 meters, a purebred diving watch. Because it was custom-made, the price was $128,000, which was less than 1 million RMB, but it was very expensive in China. Compared with the gorgeous shape of Patek Philippe, Jiang Hai actually preferred this kind of sports type. Moreover, for the current him, the bottom of the sea above 3,900 meters was not something he could easily set foot in. Not to mention 3,900 meters, he had to consider diving above 500 meters because Big Idiot couldn't go down that deep. Its usual depth was about 200 meters, and 400 meters was its limit. After all, great white sharks could only dive to 1,000 meters at most, and they didn't dare to stay any longer. Jiang Hai could ignore the pressure of the water, but it didn't mean that other creatures could do the same. If he encountered a sperm whale, king squid, or something in the depths of the sea, Jiang Hai might die there. He cherished his life so much. After catching the fish, Jiang Hai looked at the time. Unknowingly, it was already 3:00 in the afternoon. These girls may have ignored the time when they were playing on the shore. It didn't matter if they didn't eat lunch, but dinner had to be prepared. Therefore, Jiang Hai returned to the surface from the deep sea immediately. After throwing the things into the small boat, he washed his body with water, then started the engine and sped toward the dock. Not long after, Jiang Hai returned to the dock and drove a four-wheeled motorcycle away. Jiang Hai didn't say goodbye to the others and went home first. With the help of Daliana, Marian, and Mrs. Philemon, who came to help, he began to prepare dinner for today. Chapter 263. We're back. After pushing open the door of Jiang Hai's mansion, Selena Gomez's voice entered the room. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai walked out of the kitchen while cracking eggs. What he saw was still the same four people. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Aphrodite and the others had already left. In fact, although Aphrodite and the others had a lot of fun with these women today, these women were actually very vigilant. This could be seen from the fact that they didn't make any sound in front of these people. So if these people invited them back for dinner, they definitely wouldn't come back. It was precisely because of this that only four people came back tonight: Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, Chi Li, and Chi Li's assistant. Well, Jiang Hai still couldn't remember her name. Go take a shower in the room and come down, dinner is almost ready. Looking at the few people in front of him, they were obviously not in good condition. Pra Walton and Selena Gomez's bodies were still stained with fine sand, and their faces and bodies were also stained with salt left by the sea after being dried by the sun. As for Chi Li and her assistant, although they were much neater, it was still on the beach. However, on the beach, it was still a sunny day. Although they had umbrellas, they were wearing women's suits. They were still sweating profusely. Obviously, they were not in a good state. Jiang Hai's words, this time, these women did not refuse. Selena and Pra Walton immediately went upstairs, but Chi Li and her assistant hesitated for a moment. Oh, I haven't asked yet, are you going to live here too? Looking at the two, Jiang Hai patted his forehead. It seems that he hasn't arranged a place for them to live yet. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li raised her head and said with a serious face, of course, can't we? Seeing that she was obviously not in good condition, but still pretending to be arrogant, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This woman is really. Sometimes I miss her. Okay, I'll take you upstairs. After handing the egg liquid to Daliana, Jiang Hai took the two upstairs. Maybe because Jiang Hai felt that the two people's relationship with Pra Walton wasn't very good, he also arranged their room, across from Pra Walton's. For Jiang Hai, watching a good show was the happiest thing in the world. This is your room, go take a shower, change your clothes, and come down for dinner, I guess you're hungry. Carrying the two people's luggage, Jiang Hai came to the front of the guest room, put the luggage at the door, and turned to leave. Jiang Hai, I think we should talk, have a good talk, I don't know when you have time. But as soon as Jiang Hai left, Chi Li had already stretched out her hand, grabbed Jiang Hai's wrist, and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. Oh, since you are here, I think we will have time to talk. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai didn't look back, but just said a sentence calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li's eyes were a little hesitant, but she still let go of Jiang Hai's hand. The moment she let go, Jiang Hai continued to walk forward, and soon disappeared at the corner of the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Chi Li's assistant also puffed up her face and said unhappily, President Chi, look at his attitude. He left us on the beach for half a day, and now he doesn't even give us time to meet? To be honest, after she came here, she did change her view of Jiang Hai. This Jiang Hai seemed to be a bit interesting. Although she didn't know where he got the money to build this villa, at least as Qi Li's assistant, she knew very well that Jiang Hai didn't use the name of Qi Li or the Qi family to get this villa, and now it seemed that he had some cooperation with the world's largest retailer, Walmart, which was really unexpected. In the past, she felt that Jiang Hai was a mud that couldn't be supported, but when this mud began to shine, she was a little confused. But this didn't mean that she could tolerate Jiang Hai's arrogance. They had already delivered themselves to his door, but he still took it. This guy. Hearing her words, Qi Li narrowed her eyes, but there was no expression of anger on her face. Instead, she directly picked up her luggage and went to the room. Seeing that Qi Li didn't speak, the assistant could only helplessly open her mouth, and finally helplessly enter the next room. As for Jiang Hai at this time, he didn't know if he was careless or what, but after he went downstairs and entered the kitchen, he had already forgotten about this matter. Facts proved that Jiang Hai was indeed not the kind of person who liked to think about unrequited love, nor was he the kind of person who liked to think too much. About 10 minutes later, the 4 women went downstairs, and Jiang Hai had already prepared dinner. Jiang Hai's dinner had a total of 8 dishes. This was also the habit of Wuxia people. 6, 8, 10, these were all very auspicious numbers. 6 was 6, 6 was good luck, 8 was good luck, 10 was 10, 10 was 10, 10 was beautiful. Of course, December's lunar red was also good, 16 was good, 18 was good, but Jiang Hai couldn't make it. So, he only had a total of 8 dishes. The most eye-catching dishes were 2 plates of lobsters and a plate of steamed lobsters. This meter-long lobster lying on the plate was really quite scary. There was also a plate of lobsters, baked with cheese, which was made by Mrs. Philemon. In fact, it was also a dish she had just learned after coming here. After all, with the income of a cowboy, even if they bought lobsters, they would only buy small lobsters. Those lobsters could be eaten as snacks, and it was too troublesome to make them with cheese. This was all learned after coming to Jiang Hai. Around the 2 plates of lobsters, there were 6 dishes: steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, which was made by Jiang Hai, and fried grouper strips, which was made by taking off the flesh of the grouper and placing it on an iron plate to fry. Generally, this was the way to fry cod strips. Jiang Hai didn't have many opportunities to fry grouper, and this kind of fish tasted best when steamed. But considering that Pra Walton and Selena Gomez weren't used to steamed dishes, it wasn't bad to make it this way. In addition to these 3 dishes, there were 3 other dishes. Of course, the main dish, the steak, was divided into 2 portions by Jiang Hai. One portion was a fried steak that could be eaten directly with a fork, and the other portion was a steak like in a Western restaurant, 1 portion per person. These were all specially selected beef, but the ones that were eaten whole with a fork were the worst among the specially selected beef. The good ones were all made like that. In addition to the 2 steaks, there was also a large bowl of vegetable and fruit salad. This was today's dish, and there was also a large bowl of cheddar soup on the side, which was a must-have. Other than that, the main dish was white bread. After these things were arranged, Mrs. Philemon left first, and Jiang Hai's group of 7 stayed to eat. The 7 of them also sat down under Jiang Hai's signal, but there were some rules when they sat down. Jiang Hai naturally sat at the main seat, and the 2 seats beside him were for Delina and Marion. After all, these 2 were also the masters of this place. But next to Delina were Pra Walton and Selena Gomez, and next to Marion were Qi Li and her assistant. But after her assistant came downstairs, her original dissatisfaction disappeared. At this time, her eyes were only on the 2 lobsters, the large plate of 2-headed abalone, the large plate of sea cucumber, and countless steaks. She suddenly felt that Jiang Hai was quite good, at least she didn't have to worry about not being able to eat good food with him. Since you're all here, sit down and eat. Seeing everyone sit down, Jiang Hai sat at the main seat and smiled at everyone. He was not a Westerner, nor was he a Wuxia scholar. He didn't have anything to be particular about. Whether it was others who invited him to eat or he invited others to eat, the most important thing was to feel comfortable and comfortable. Extravagance and etiquette didn't work for him. He didn't want to be controlled by others when he was eating. Jiang Hai, aren't you going to introduce them first? Seeing Jiang Hai picking up the fork to eat the steak, Qi Li couldn't help but cough lightly, then raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai. What's there to introduce? Didn't I introduce them just now? Prawalton, Selena Gomez. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts, but Qi Li rolled her eyes at him, and at the same time, signaled to his side with her eyes. At this time, Jiang Hai remembered that Qi Li wanted him to introduce Delina and Marian. This is Delina Iveline, my adopted daughter. This is her twin sister, Marian Iveline. This is Prawalton, you've met in the morning. She's the god of wealth who came to give your dad money this time. This is Selena Gomez, haven't you heard her songs before? As for these two, this is Qi Li, your dad's. Since Qi Li wanted to introduce them, Jiang Hai didn't say much, and directly introduced them at the dining table. It was fine when he first introduced Prawalton, but when he introduced Qi Li, Jiang Hai hesitated a little, because he didn't know what to introduce. It seemed like he only said that she was his friend on the beach just now, so he should call her his friend now. But before Jiang Hai finished his words, Qi Li interrupted Jiang Hai, I'm your mother, his wife. My name is Qi Li. Maybe you've heard him talk about me, maybe you haven't, but it doesn't matter. This is a gift I brought from China, I hope you like it. Listening to Qi Li's standard English pronunciation, Jiang Hai was stunned, Walton and Selena Gomez were stunned, even Delina and Marian were stunned, including Qi Li's assistant. At this time, countless eyes were looking at her. Chapter 264. However, under the gaze of these people, Qi Li seemed to treat them as air. She just took out 2 wrapped gifts from her bag and deliberately stood up. Then, she placed one gift in front of the 2 girls. President Qi. Looking at the 2 boxes, Qi Li's assistant was a little stunned. Others might not know what those 2 gifts were, but she knew very well that those 2 gifts were not cheap. Moreover, they were custom-made. It could be said that in this world, there were only these 2 things, and there was no third. Originally, the assistant thought that Qi Li prepared them for her mother. Now, it seemed that they were prepared for the 2 girls. However, at this time, not only the assistant was more confused, but Jiang Hai was also more confused. He really wanted to ask this woman what she meant. Was she trying to trick him? However, it was really difficult for him to ask this question. After all, there were outsiders here. Therefore, he just looked at Delina and Marian. At this time, the 2 girls were also a little confused. They didn't understand what was going on. Why did a mother suddenly appear? They knew about the things between Jiang Hai and Qi Li in China, but they didn't know the details. Now, it seemed that a mother from China came to find them. Accept it. Although he was a little confused, a little puzzled, and a little unhappy, Jiang Hai still nodded. After all, there were outsiders and children here. Jiang Hai couldn't say too much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and Marian also opened the gift boxes in front of them. This was also the difference between foreigners and Chinese people. After Chinese people received the gift, they didn't open it immediately. Instead, they would wait until they went home to open it. In this way, it was hard to say whether the other party had more money or not. After all, people cared about their face. However, people in the United States were more accustomed to opening the gift and then expressing their love. This also gave the giver a chance to show his face in front of others. Of course, if the gift wasn't good, then showing his face would become a disgrace. However, obviously, Qi Li, who had been in the United States for so long, knew this. In addition, she was very confident in her gift. When the gift boxes were opened, 2 diamond bracelets appeared in front of the 2 girls. Wow, it's so beautiful. These 2 bracelets were obviously designed by a famous designer. It was very likely that it was a limited edition. The base should be platinum, and in the middle of the platinum, there should be 10 diamonds. The main diamond is about 1 carat, and the other 9 diamonds are more than 50 cents. This bracelet's diamond alone is worth about $10,000. In addition to the design fee and the platinum, this bracelet is worth about $20,000. This is the most expensive gift. This is a little too expensive. Jiang Hai glanced at the 2 bracelets. Although he didn't know how much they cost, he knew that they definitely wouldn't be cheap since they were so shiny. Therefore, he said to Qi Li hesitantly, "Is this for you?" "It's for the children. Since you agreed to accept it, it has nothing to do with you. Don't look at it first. You can look at it when you go back to your room." However, Qi Li retorted after hearing Jiang Hai's words. When she saw that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, Qi Li changed her style and instantly became a good wife and mother. She looked at the 2 girls in front of her and said gently. The 2 girls looked at her, looked at each other, and nodded at her. Then, they gestured a thank you with their hands and put the gift box away. However, they put it behind their chairs like they treasured it very much. Jiang Hai had always been raising these 2 girls according to the principle of adopted daughters. Although he didn't spoil them, it could be said that he spoiled them very much. Except for sleeping with him, he gave them whatever they wanted. Clothes, toys, TVs, game consoles, computers, mobile phones, iPads, and so on. These 2 girls had everything that other people's children had. Moreover, they were all of the best quality. However, Jiang Hai had never bought such expensive jewelry before. Then let's eat first." Seeing that this matter seemed to be over, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly and asked everyone to start eating. As for the assistant that he hadn't introduced, well, who would care about her? As Jiang Hai moved his knife and fork first, everyone started to eat. Jiang Hai cut the beef. Daliana, Marian, and Selena Gomez each got a piece of fish. Compared to beef, Daliana and Marian preferred to eat fish because they often ate fish when they were homeless. Fish was much cheaper than beef, so they had been used to eating it. As for Selena Gomez, she purely wanted to maintain her figure. Since she came to Prawalton, her target was beef. Naturally, she also cut beef. Qi Li's assistant's eyes didn't leave the lobsters and abalones when they were on the table. Now that the meal started, she immediately got an abalone to eat. This was a wild abalone that had been raised in cold water for many years. Naturally, its taste was much better than those raised in China. Even compared to those in Australia, it was much better than those in China. Whether it was fish or seafood in cold water, due to the environment, they could only grow for a few months in a year. However, they could grow for a year in temperate and tropical areas. Therefore, a fish that lived in temperate or tropical zones for a year would have to live in cold water zones for a few years. The constant stimulation of the cold water made the meat firm and sweet. In terms of taste, the seafood in cold water zones was indeed more delicious than those in temperate or tropical zones. Just like now, although it was the simplest cooking method, the assistant's eyes lit up as soon as she ate it. Compared to her assistant, Qi Li's first goal was to eat the vegetable salad. However, seeing that her assistant was eating so happily, she ate the cheesy lobster instead. The lobster meat had already been torn, and there was a layer of mozzarella cheese on it. The rich taste of cheese had already drifted in the air. This made the assistant, who hadn't even swallowed the abalone, swallow her saliva crazily. Qi Li forked the piece of lobster with cheese and put it into her mouth. Her eyes instantly lit up. Oh, delicious. The lobster's taste was a little like that of shrimp, but it was 100 times firmer and dozens of times more delicious. Its meat was fresh and tough. If one used their teeth to tear it, it would be a little troublesome. The cooked lobster already tasted pretty good. Now, there was cheese on top. It didn't destroy the original taste of the lobster. Instead, it made the lobster, which was originally fresh, tough, and thick, had an even stronger taste of cheese and milk. It really made people salivate just by looking at it. This lobster is really good, but compared to Jiang Hai's steak, it's a far cry. Looking at the two people eating with grease dripping from their mouths, Selena Gomez also took a small bite and said with a smile. Hearing her words, the two people, who were still fighting over the abalone and lobster, looked at the steak in front of them with some confusion. To be honest, they had already seen the steak at the first moment. But the appearance of the steak, Jiang Hai didn't care about that when cooking. Because it was almost fully cooked, there was inevitably a layer of slightly charred black on top of the steak. Coupled with the black pepper sauce, it could be said that a piece of charcoal was beautified and placed there to deceive a lot of people. Compared to steak, seafood looked much better. Wuxia food was particular about color, fragrance, and taste. The first was color. If the food wasn't good-looking, how could they eat it? Originally, if Selena Gomez was the only one talking, the two people would hesitate for a moment. However, when Qi Li saw that Pra Walton was about to finish the steak in the distance, she knew that there must be something behind the steak. Otherwise, that woman wouldn't be so interested in it. She temporarily put down the other food in her hand and looked at Jiang Hai's steak. She picked up the knife and fork and cut a piece of it. As Qi Li put the steak in her mouth and bit it, the thick lean meat wrapped in the marbled texture and the melted fat inside the steak instantly gushed out of her mouth. The beef was firm, fresh, and tender, and it constantly attacked her taste buds and teeth. Once she took a bite of this kind of steak, it was almost impossible to stop her mouth from eating it. Her eyes gradually became a little blurred. In a daze, she seemed to have returned to more than 10 years ago. She still remembered that her whole family went to the capital with her father. Because at that time, her father brought back a girl, which made Qi Li extremely dissatisfied with her father. In order to please his eldest daughter, Qi Li's father took her to Japan for a trip. In Hyogo County, his father invited her to eat the beef there once. The taste of the beef was exactly the same as the beef she ate today. This is 5A grade beef? Looking at the almost charred beef in front of her, Qi Li was full of disbelief. Almost, to be exact, it should be specially selected grade beef. After all, we are not in Japan, but I believe the quality should not be worse than the Japanese. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He is quite confident in his beef. At this time, Pra Walton also finished the steak. I think it's time for us to talk about our cooperation. As she put down the knife and fork, she also said to Jiang Hai seriously. Chapter 265. Oh. I'm all ears. To be honest, Jiang Hai had been waiting for her to talk about this for a long time. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, these women were a little redundant. What's the point of having fun? It's better to just do what Mr. Zhang did. How many cows are directly ordered, how much meat is on those cows, how much is slaughtered, how much is exchanged, and that's it. Pra Walton still has to come to see and play, isn't it troublesome? But now, after all, it's a buyer's market. Although Jiang Hai can easily sell these cows, most places like Western restaurants can't accept more than 10,000 cows from Jiang Hai, although Jiang Hai's name has become famous this time. But it's only in New York. No one in the United States or Western United States knows who he is. So if Jiang Hai doesn't want to sell to the middleman at a low price, and he also wants to save trouble, this Walton must be caught. Your beef here, to be honest, is better than I expected. If the full score of beef is 100 points, your beef can be 95 points, but now it's only 80 points. The 15 points deducted is because your chef is too bad. If I were you, I would have fired the chef. Raising his index finger, Walton said with a serious face. Although she is a bit chinibu, sometimes she doesn't go to work, but when it comes to business, she won't joke. Oh, the beef is made by myself. In fact, if a chef really makes a dish like this, in fact, even if Walton doesn't say it, Jiang Hai will fire him, but he made it himself, so there is no way to fire him. I already thought about it. Now let's talk about the truth. I haven't carefully looked at the ranch in your manner. I don't know what secret recipes you have, and I'm not interested in knowing. If I want to buy the whole cow, you won't agree, so let's calculate according to the slaughtered cow. After the cow is slaughtered, how much is the meat of each grade? Let's talk about it first. In fact, according to the working principle of Americans, they don't talk about business when eating, so naturally, they don't talk about business. Eating is eating, and there is nothing else mixed in, but Walton knows that Jiang Hai is a Wuxia. As a Wuxia who has been in the United States for half a year, it is difficult for him to change the habits of Wuxia. Talking business at the dinner table is also one of the characteristics of Wuxia, so she can cater to his interests. If you can guarantee the quality of your beef cattle here, I can buy all your beef cattle. I think you are in this line of work, you should also know the current market price very well. The average premium grade beef is $375 per pound, the special grade beef is $130 per pound, the best grade beef is $50 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is useless to me, but I can also take it. After all, we still have places that sell beef normally in Walmart. The price I give you, you can consider it. I will give you a higher price for the premium grade beef, $380 per pound, the special grade beef is $140 per pound, the best grade beef is $55 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is according to the market price. I think you also understand that there is no profit in this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton casually quoted the price. After listening to her words, Jiang Hai also calculated in his heart. Although his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition, his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition. But after these days of farming, he had earned a certain commission for the quality of his beef cattle. According to this price, he could sell one beef cattle for about $120,000 before tax. If he took all the rest, apart from the $2,000 that he had to give to Mr. Zhang, there would still be more than $11,000 left, which would be worth more than $1.2 billion. This was a big deal. To be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tempted. Wait a minute, the price you said is the price after you want to buy out our beef? But before Jiang Hai agreed, Qi Li had recovered from the shock and looked at Walton seriously. Of course, seeing Qi Li looking at her, Walton narrowed her eyes and said lightly, "I don't think this is a very reasonable price." Qi Li listened to her words and shook her head. "Oh? What's not reasonable?" Seeing Qi Li directly say that it is not reasonable, Walton was a little surprised. "I can't deny that you want to reserve the rest of the beef. Let's not talk about the price of the beef. Let's not talk about the special selection, the best selection, the standard and the commercial price. The price of the special quality beef is a bit inappropriate." Taking a look at Walton, Keely's mind spun rapidly. After all, not long ago, she also lived in the United States for a few years, so she has some understanding of the price of beef. As a rich second generation in China, especially a woman, she knows how cheap beef is in the United States, and how expensive top-grade beef is. Compared with most people in China who don't know about the grading of beef, Qili at least knows a little about it, although she doesn't know much about it. In general, the special quality beef in the United States is equal to the 4A and 5A grade beef in Japan. But the price of 4A and 5A grade beef is different in Japan. Now Walton directly fixed the price, which is obviously to make Jiang Hai confused. Maybe some people will say that it is actually good to fix the price like this, because after all, there is beef better than this standard, and there is beef worse than this standard. But don't forget, there must be a ratio between the two, and the good beef should be much less than the bad beef. For example, Jiang Hai's beef, the retail price of a special grade beef is more than $375. Even in New York and other places with higher sales costs, it can reach more than $400. Especially good grade 5A beef can even be sold for $420, $430 or more. The price difference between these is not just a few pieces of meat. She doesn't know much about beef, but she is after all a businesswoman. She feels that the price above must be fluctuating. If that's the case, what's the price? Hearing Qi Li's words, Walton gently tapped Jiang Hai's long oak table with her hand and looked at Qi Li with a playful look. We still need to discuss this. Didn't you come here to have fun? Then you don't need to be in a hurry. Qi Li knows that at this time, it is not a good thing to reveal the bottom price. Moreover, she doesn't know much about this manner. In the principle of not letting Jiang Hai suffer losses in front of her, she still said very indifferently. Well, I didn't expect Jiang Hai to be a henpecked man. Looking at Qi Li's domineering look, Walton is not in a hurry. Originally, she just gave a tentative price. She really came here to have fun. But she also came here to discuss business. Compared with those who do anything to make money, she is more polite. At least the price she offered is not too outrageous, but since she was seen through by others, she doesn't care. She is not an ordinary businesswoman with a small pattern. She is Walton, the person in charge of Sam's Club of the Walmart family. In fact, Qi Li's skill is still far from hers, but she is very interested and continues to watch. Oh. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai really doesn't know how to respond. After all, there is no need to make the matter between him and Qi Li known to everyone, so at this time, it is better for him to remain silent. Well, after dinner, is there anything else? Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton said with a smile. As if the woman who just returned to the Ice Queen has nothing to do with the woman in front of him. He had to admit that the speed at which this woman changed her face really made Jiang Hai dumbfounded. No. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said to her very clearly. Hearing Jiang Hai's direct words, Walton didn't care. She said hello to the others, especially to Selena Gomez, and then went upstairs. Looking at her appearance, Selena Gomez smiled awkwardly. She is such a person. She is actually a little embarrassed to come with her, but sometimes she can't say it. Well, she is full, but I am not full yet. Everyone, continue. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the table that had been paused at this time became lively again. Of course, the main reason is that there is Qi Li's assistant. This girl was really a foodie. Although she was using a fork, which was not her best weapon, she was still invincible on the dining table. Especially after knowing that the steaks were delicious, her fork danced even faster. It is hard to understand how the food is in her stomach. I have to admit that this girl is actually good-looking and has a good figure, but eating like this doesn't seem like it. All in all, the meal is still very harmonious. Except for some small mistakes, everything else is within Jiang Hai's expectations. After the meal, Qi Li touched her belly that is already a little round. She took her assistant back to the room, and Selena Gomez also went back to her room. Daliana and Marian also helped Jiang Hai to tidy up and went back to their room to look at the bracelet. Although they didn't say it, it is obvious that they really like the gift Qi Li gave them this time. This is also what gives Jiang Hai the most headache. After all, in his opinion, he and Qi Li didn't seem to have reached this point. After tidying up the dinner, Jiang Hai returned to his room and threw his body on the big bed. Then, he rubbed Goldie's head that was not released because there are guests at night. He looked at the ceiling. He has a feeling that this time, Qi Li is very likely to come to talk to him about the matter between them. And according to the fact that she flew so far, it is impossible for her to cut him in half as he wishes. He is afraid that there will be more problems. Chapter 266. Tap 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 tap. The sound of high heels hitting the wooden floor echoed in Jiang Hai's villa. For this sound, whether it was before or now, the people and beasts in Jiang Hai's villa were not used to it. The people who heard this sound were fine, they might not care, but Goldie and Xiaofan woke up immediately. Feeling the reaction of these two dogs, Jiang Hai also sat up from his sleep. It's not that he remembered, but after all, the incident a while ago didn't happen too long ago. Jiang Hai has to be careful now. After waking up, Jiang Hai took a look at the time. It was only 10:30 in the evening. Although it was completely dark outside, it didn't seem to be the time to sleep. Just now, Jiang Hai was lying in bed, thinking about Qi Li, and unknowingly fell asleep. As for the TV, it was turned off. Needless to say, Jiang Hai knew that it was Goldie who did it. Now their IQ is no worse than the children at home. Seeing that Jiang Hai fell asleep and turned off the TV, it's not a problem for them. Sometimes, they even help Jiang Hai with the quilt and so on. Of course, that's in winter. With the current temperature, Jiang Hai won't catch a cold even if he doesn't cover himself with the quilt at night. What's the situation? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was also a little confused. He listened carefully and there was indeed the sound of high heels. Knock knock knock. Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, a light knock came from outside the door. Who is it? Although a little curious, Jiang Hai still got up from the bed and asked while walking forward. It's me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's clear voice also came from outside the door. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop, but he still walked to the door and opened it. Then a neatly dressed Qi Li appeared in front of him. Oh, it's so late, what's the matter? Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. He just fell asleep. You haven't slept yet? If you haven't slept, accompany me for a walk. Although Jiang Hai's words were somewhat puzzled and complaining, Qi Li didn't seem to hear the meaning of Jiang Hai's words. She still looked at Jiang Hai indifferently and said softly. So late? Looking at the sky outside, although it's 10:30, for people in the city, nightlife has just begun, but in Winthrop, to be exact, Zhang's Manor, it's already late at night. You don't want me to stand here all the time, then let's go. But Qi Li didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to refuse. Instead, she stood there and said to Jiang Hai. Although he was still a little sleepy, Jiang Hai also knew that he really needed to have a good talk with Qi Li, so after hesitating for a moment, he nodded and closed the door. After about 2 or 3 minutes, when the door opened again, Jiang Hai had already put on his clothes. The two left Jiang Hai's villa one after the other. They walked along the street lamp area set up by Jiang Hai in the manor and slowly walked towards the beach. One had to admit that the night view of Jiang Hai's manor was actually very good. Because the air was not polluted, walking on the manor's road, one could see the sky full of stars, listen to the sound of the wind, and listen to the sound of the waves being rolled up and slapped on the beach. The street lamps weren't very bright, and the hazy feeling made people feel like they were in a fairy tale world. On the lawn in the distance, groups of fireflies were flying around in the grass, giving people a quiet and comfortable feeling. Jiang Hai and Qi Li walked side by side here, but one walked on the leftmost side of the road, and the other walked on the rightmost side of the road. The two's pace and breath were almost the same, but there was no trace of the intention to interact. Although such a scenery was beautiful, Jiang Hai was used to it, so now he just yawned and walked forward in a daze. Qi Li seemed to pay more attention to the scenery she saw along the way. Unknowingly, the two had been walking for more than 10 minutes. The lights in the distant villa were almost too far to see clearly. Jiang Hai gradually calmed down under the blow of the cold wind. Wiping his face, Jiang Hai asked Qi Li, "You called me out, what's the matter? Don't tell me you just want to find someone to accompany you to see the night view. This is one of them, but I called you out because I have something to tell you. But let's make it clear first, no matter what we talk about later, you must not be angry." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li still looked up at the sky and said indifferently, "Okay." Jiang Hai also understands that some things can't be solved by anger. Since she wants to talk, Jiang Hai won't easily lose his temper. The reason why he was so angry last time was because he felt that he was played. But this time, it's in my territory. Want to play with me? How can it be so easy? Let me ask first, did I do anything wrong to you? Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Qi Li's footsteps stopped. Since walking out of the villa, she faced Jiang Hai for the first time. A pair of big eyes just stood there, staring at Jiang Hai, and said word by word. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop. No. Thinking about it carefully, although he had a hard time in the previous year, but to be exact, from the beginning, the other party had already made her intentions clear. She and Jiang Hai are not people of the same world. If from the beginning, Jiang Hai didn't consider the relationship between husband and wife and didn't want to be a toad-eating swan meat, he might not be so disappointed. Of course, this is also a bit absolute. Relationship matters are not like business. It's not so back and forth. If it's really like business, then it's fine. Qi Li and Jiang Hai are together just to use Jiang Hai to stabilize the Qi family, and Jiang Hai and Qi Li are together just for the 400,000 yuan to tide over the difficulties. If he had already thought it through before getting married, maybe Jiang Hai wouldn't be as sad as before. It's precisely because she gave him hope and then destroyed it that makes Jiang Hai the most sad. It's also because of this reason that Jiang Hai wants to get rid of this woman so much after having a golden finger. But now when Qi Li asked him what he had done wrong to Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li turned her head and continued to walk forward, and then said slowly, "It's not that easy. Can you tell me why you are so determined to divorce me? Because it was a mistake between us. You don't love me. The funny thing is that I used to hope that you might look back at me. But you didn't do so for more than a year, so I woke up. You and I are not people from the same world. Since you don't like me and you don't want to be with me, then I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't like to kiss someone's cold butt." "Oh, I'm sorry, this analogy is not very good." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also spoke slowly. Although he recalled some bitterness in the past, fortunately, he was used to it. "So later, I felt that our marriage was actually a mistake. Instead of this, it's better to break it off directly. You can live the life you are familiar with, find a man who likes you and you like, and can help you in your career, and I will continue to live a lazy life. I feel that this kind of life where we don't interfere with each other is what we need." Gently tapping his heels, Jiang Hai said as he walked forward. "So, you made the decision for me?" Still not looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li walked slowly and spoke slowly. "It's not about who makes the decision for whom. The main thing is that one of us has to take this step. You and I are together for nothing more than to stabilize the Qi enterprises. Now that the Qi enterprises has stabilized, I am no longer an important decoration. As for me and you, apart from the naivety and desire of a toad to eat a swan's meat, the main reason is that 400,000 yuan. I'll return the 400,000 yuan to you. If you feel that it's not enough, you can pay me 4 million yuan, 40 million yuan, or even 400 million yuan. Take it as me paying for our relationship. Kicking the pebbles on the road, Jiang Hai was a little excited, but after the excitement, he remembered the agreement between him and Qi Li. He took a deep breath and calmed down again. 400 million yuan? You are really rich. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li smiled softly and said with a serious face. To tell you the truth, if you want to buy my Pra Walton tonight, according to her offer, I can make almost 1 billion yuan, US dollars, after deducting the tax, there will be at least 600 million yuan left. If you want, I can give it all to you. Looking at Qi Li's face, Jiang Hai said sincerely. Now that he has spiritual energy, money is actually just a string of numbers for him. Even if he doesn't make a penny this year, he can guarantee that he will make a lot of money next year. He now has such confidence and such strength. I really didn't expect you to be so rich. I really didn't expect that you would be so much richer than me now. It seems that my mother's vision was really good back then. She chose you to be my husband at first glance. However, you may be wrong. You and I have known each other for more than 20 years. Although there were more than 10 years in between when we went our separate ways, you should know what kind of person I am. No one doesn't like money, but my desire for money can't override my thinking. Hearing that Jiang Hai could give her 4 billion yuan so easily, Qi Li was also a little surprised. When a man was willing to give all his wealth to a woman, either he loved the woman very much, or he was extremely disappointed with the woman. He would rather use all his wealth in exchange for freedom. Then what do you want? Listening to the meaning of Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai felt that she didn't intend to divorce him. This time, Jiang Hai was also a little helpless. He couldn't help but shake his hand and said to her with some annoyance. However, his appearance didn't scare Qi Li. Instead, Qi Li raised her head and said faintly, I want you. Chapter 267. The sea breeze blew through Jiang Hai's manor with a faint fishy smell and the smell of green grass. On the path inside the manor, Jiang Hai and Qi Li stood there, looking at each other. When Jiang Hai heard Qi Li's words, his eyes widened unconsciously. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could be stuffed in. He really didn't expect Qi Li to say that. What does she mean by that? Doesn't she know that I will misunderstand? Cough, I must be thinking too much. She definitely didn't mean that. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to hide his shocked expression. Then he whispered in his heart, but his eyes unconsciously looked at Qi Li. Tonight, Qi Li was dressed very formally, just like her usual style. She wore a slim-fit woman's suit with a corset waist. It seemed to be a brand, but Jiang Hai didn't know. Inside, she wore a white woman's blouse with flowers. She was wearing a short striped checkered skirt. Of course, this was just for show. She also had a pair of tight-fitting leather pants. Below the leather pants was a pair of women's black high-heeled boots. She looked fashionable, but also had a sense of strictness. Whether you believe it or not, at the beginning, I really didn't mean to give up on you. Although, as you said, the main purpose of marrying you is to stabilize the Qi family, at least I didn't think of having a second marriage. You are my husband, that's all. Not knowing whether it was because of Jiang Hai's expression or because Qi Li was a little surprised by what she said, she immediately turned around and walked forward as if she wanted to explain what she had just said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also turned around and continued to walk with her. But this time, he didn't walk side by side with her. Instead, he deliberately walked half a step behind because Jiang Hai suddenly didn't know how to face her. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't refuse a woman who came to him. After all, he wasn't a good person. However, he had to be careful when it came to Qi Li. His sixth sense, well, in fact, it was all senses. He could clearly feel that he was no match for her. It would never be wrong to be careful. Qi Li didn't look at Jiang Hai at this time and just slowly said her original thoughts. When I married you, I did have some resistance, but it wasn't because of you. It was mainly because my heart was filled with hatred. So, the day after the wedding, I returned to the capital. I wanted to consolidate the Qi family. The Qi family can't be destroyed in my hands. I want revenge. If I let the Yin family know that, the Qi family won't be destroyed. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, so he couldn't interrupt and just continued to walk with her. I'm not a woman who likes to take credit, but there are some things that I feel it's better to make clear to you. I may have forgotten you, but I've never given up on you, nor have I let you down. In fact, when I called you for the first time, I was also prepared to ask you to come to the capital. Of course, it's not that I'm really unwanted, to the extent that I have to find you to repay you with my body. I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself. If you prove yourself, we may be the most compatible people in the world. Even if you can't prove yourself, I'm not going to divorce you. To be exact, no matter how bad it is, it will just drag on. In my heart, I've never had the slightest thought of betraying you. Qi Li walked in front and kept talking about her true thoughts. Some of these words were good, some were bad, and some were harsh to Jiang Hai's ears. However, he felt that these words should be true, because even if she wanted to deceive people, she couldn't deceive people completely. Only when it was 30% false and 70% true could she deceive people. Jiang Hai didn't know whether Qi Li was telling the truth or not, but Jiang Hai was willing to listen to her. I don't understand why. I don't understand. Even if you're rich now and don't want to be by my side anymore, don't want me to give you another chance, and don't want to rely on me like this anymore, I don't seem to have any restrictions on you. When we were in Ice City, I saw you in that situation, and I didn't say anything. In the US, let's not talk about you staying obediently. Let's not talk about Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and your 2 daughters. Just the 8 girls in the manor. They have good figures, ages, height, and looks. Let's not talk about you not having any relationship with them. Maybe you don't have any feelings for them, but they have feelings for you. Forget it, it's meaningless to talk about this. It's your business. However, as she spoke, Qi Li's words became a little sour. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little stunned. Was this really Qi Li, that strong woman? Could it be that she was pretending? It's useless to talk about this. I came here this time to relax. Recently, the air in China isn't very good, so I came here to recuperate. Secondly, and most importantly, I feel that we should sort out our relationship. At this point, Qi Li looked at Jiang Hai very seriously. Since you don't want me to give you a chance to change your mind, I don't want you to change your mind. Since you don't need me to give you a chance now, and you don't want to change your mind, then let's think of a compromise. I'm not ready for a divorce yet. Moreover, domestic affairs are not as simple as you think. The waters are murky. The title of a married woman is still useful to me. At least when I go to negotiate some contracts, those people who make things difficult for me will be much less difficult. Therefore, I won't divorce you, but you can rest assured that I have no intention of taking your manor and your money. After I go back, I will ask a lawyer to write a certificate. In the future, I won't take a single cent of your money. I won't interfere too much with your life here, but you can't divorce this marriage. Taking a deep breath, Qi Li said a lot of words in one breath. Then, she looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. She knew that the relationship between her and Jiang Hai was indeed a little delicate. It was impossible for her to come and beg Jiang Hai softly. However, if she didn't make it clear, then Jiang Hai would really force her to divorce him. She didn't know if Jiang Hai was afraid or for other reasons. Anyway, now Jiang Hai was eager to get rid of her. However, after Qi Li's investigation, she found that Jiang Hai didn't live with anyone else. Secondly, he didn't have a girlfriend. This wasn't because of a change of heart that made him determined to divorce her. As long as no one stirred up trouble, based on her understanding of Jiang Hai, she was confident that she could convince Jiang Hai. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little hesitant. Just like Qi Li said, Jiang Hai was in a hurry to divorce her not because he wanted to start a new relationship. To be honest, the only thing he had in mind was Clive. The other women were just so. Jiang Hai wouldn't give up his feelings for them. It was probably the same for the other women. The reason why he wanted to say goodbye to Lu Li as soon as possible was because he was a little angry at the beginning. Secondly, he felt that he had waited for too long and it wasn't worth it. However, just like Qi Li said, she didn't owe him anything and didn't do anything to let him down. She also didn't have any thoughts about his manner or his money. At the same time, she didn't care about his private life. As long as he didn't divorce her, everything else was fine. Since Qi Li had already said so, Jiang Hai really didn't have anything else to say. She had already made it clear that this identity was still useful to her. Jiang Hai didn't really want to force her. This wasn't his style. Therefore, looking at Qi Li beside him, Jiang Hai sighed. He felt that sometimes he was too soft-hearted. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li and said slowly, "If you really want to sign the contract, then I'll consider it. However, I have to say the ugly words first. After all, I'm also going to get married. Although I don't have a clear partner yet, I'm not young anymore. I have to think about my own future." Although he was a very stubborn person, but sometimes his ears were soft. Before, Qi Li had refused to leave, so Jiang Hai thought that his little secret had been discovered. That's why she insisted on staying by his side. Now, after listening to her words, although he didn't know whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai still decided to do so. But even though his heart had already decided, although he had already made up his mind, he couldn't admit it so easily. It had to be said that sometimes men were so forgetful. Jiang Hai didn't think about the disdain he had received in the past and the suffering of being alone in an empty room. Although now it seemed that even if she wanted to come over and recommend herself, Jiang Hai still had to reconsider. However, if she really didn't want to divorce him, no matter what the reason was, Jiang Hai really didn't want to be too ruthless. "Phew, I didn't expect you to be so considerate. Thank you very much. I originally thought that I might have to pay some price." Although Jiang Hai didn't say it clearly, Qi Li had already understood. She turned her head and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. The strong and serious expression on her face was like winter snow at this time. This was the first time Jiang Hai saw Qi Li's smiling face since she was a child. Under the fireflies, starlight, moonlight, and hazy street lights, it was really beautiful. "What do you want to pay? What can you pay?" Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked subconsciously. But when he asked, he regretted it a little. This sentence was obviously a little flirtatious. Sure enough, Qi Li didn't answer, but snorted softly and walked quickly toward the road ahead. But at this moment, a low whimper came into Jiang Hai's ears. Chapter 268. Wu. But just as Jiang Hai was filled with emotion, a low whimper passed into Jiang Hai's ears. When he reacted, he only saw a pair of green eyes. At this time, they suddenly emerged from the lawn behind Qi Li. At the sight of these green eyes, Jiang Hai's heart subconsciously thumped. He wasn't superstitious enough to believe that there were demons and ghosts. However, there were green eyes in the lawn and a whimpering sound. Needless to say, there must be a beast in the lawn. Green eyes meant that the animal had night vision. Although there were no lions or tigers in North America, there were still many creatures with night vision. For example, the largest canine, the North American gray wolf, jaguar, puma, bear, and so on. But at this time, the North American gray wolf had been extinct for some time. Even if there were wild ones now, they were only in Yellowstone Park. It was unlikely to appear here. Jaguars were similar to the North American gray wolf. They had disappeared for a long time. Maybe there were still some in the Amazon jungle, but they definitely couldn't be seen in Boston. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, it couldn't be a bear, because the size of a bear was obviously impossible to hide in the grass. Jiang Hai still couldn't see it. So he ruled it out. Coupled with the legends he had heard before, the only possibility in Boston was a creature with night vision and a similar size. There was only one kind, puma, which was a mountain lion. There was once a mountain lion that went down the mountain and was shot dead by the police. When he bought the fur coat, Jiang Hai still remembered the shop assistant's words very clearly. If there was no accident, then this pair of green eyes should belong to this kind of beast. Be careful. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai had already rushed over, and the powerful explosive force was used in an instant. Before Qi Li could react, she was pulled into Jiang Hai's arms, and she was stunned for a moment. This was the first time a man had taken the initiative to pull her into his arms. In the past, even when she was dating in Zhongwu, she was always in the position of absolute initiative. Things like throwing herself into his arms, let alone doing it, she didn't even think about it. The two had been dating for 3 years. When they walked together in the first year, the distance between them was half a meter. In the second year, they could walk side by side on the road. Maybe it was because Qi Li didn't believe in men and marriage because her father gave birth to her second sister, so it was really difficult for her to walk into any strange man's heart. In the third year, they would look at the phone or hold hands while shopping. In Qi Li's eyes, this had already reached the point of marriage, but before they could talk, something happened. It could only be said that Zhongwu was really a sad person. But today, her first time was buried in Jiang Hai's hands. However, Jiang Hai hugged her quickly, but he threw her even faster. Before she could react, Jiang Hai had already hugged her and spun her around in a circle, then threw her behind him. Then, there was a bang sound, and Qi Li's butt and the hard ground had an intimate contact, making her frown and grimace in pain. Just as she was about to ask Jiang Hai what was wrong with him, she saw a ferocious beast slowly walking out of the bushes. This beast looks like a lioness, but it looks slightly smaller than a lion. Under the hazy street lights, it looks very beautiful, but at the same time, it is also very hazy, but because of the night vision, its eyes are green, and the sharp and long canine teeth in its mouth means that it is definitely not a good thing. Jiang Hai is also standing here at this time, staring at it. Sure enough, it's this thing. Looking at his opponent, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, his body unconsciously arched, and his hands vigorously spread out, trying to make himself look bigger. This looked ridiculous to humans, but in nature, it was very useful. Making oneself look bigger was the only way to survive in nature. Jiang Hai didn't learn this, but it was as if he was born with it in his mind. He felt that it might be related to the tattoos on his body. Sure enough, seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the mountain lion, which was originally testing the waters, couldn't help but stop and look at Jiang Hai with some vigilance. Jiang Hai also looked at it with vigilance. The man and the beast looked at each other like this, looking for any opportunity to destroy. When the man and the beast stood still, Jiang Hai also put his hand in his mouth, and a clear whistle came out of his mouth. Hearing this whistle, the mountain lion opposite him was stunned, but when it heard the sound coming from the villa area in the distance, it knew that the human in front of it was calling for an accomplice, which made the mountain lion extremely angry. At that moment, it couldn't care less. Its body naturally crouched down, its hind legs kicked, opened its bloody mouth, and bit at Jiang Hai. Unfortunately, this guy chose the wrong opponent. Jiang Hai looked at the mountain lion pouncing on him. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. The first thing he did was to let go of his head. The mountain lion's pounce was very clever. It was equivalent to 3 strikes. The first was to use its body to knock the opponent down. If it didn't knock the opponent down, the second was to use its claws to firmly nail the opponent's flesh. If the claws were pulled out, there would be a bloody hole. This was to injure the opponent and also to stabilize its body. If the claws were fixed, the third move would be to bite. It wouldn't bite other places, but the throat, and kill in one blow. The speed and explosive power of a mountain lion were naturally faster than that of a human. Even if a person's reaction speed was extremely fast, it wouldn't be easy to dodge the pouncing attack of a mountain lion if it hadn't reached the limit. In other words, it was at the level of professional training. However, Jiang Hai wasn't an ordinary person after all. If he hadn't leveled up and encountered this mountain lion, he might have been able to dodge, but it was inevitable that he would be scratched and be at a disadvantage. However, now that his physical fitness was twice that of an ordinary person's, Jiang Hai could react. His brain could react, give orders, and his body could follow. His explosive power wasn't weaker than this lion's. Jiang Hai instantly dodged the pouncing attack of the lion and directly dived under the lion's stomach. Then, Jiang Hai directly punched the mountain lion's stomach with a rising dragon punch, causing the mountain lion to lose its balance in midair. Its body turned and fell heavily to the side. However, if a mountain lion was so easy to deal with, it wouldn't be a mountain lion. After landing, it scratched twice with its claws and was about to stand up and fight again. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't give it a chance to fight again. Just now, Jiang Hai tested it. Compared to this mountain lion, his physical fitness was twice that of a human's. There were advantages and disadvantages. In terms of strength, he naturally had the advantage. However, in terms of agility, explosive power, and speed, although he had some advantages, the advantages weren't very obvious. If he continued fighting like this, he could win, but he couldn't avoid being scratched and scratched. After all, he wasn't carrying a weapon at this time, so taking advantage of its weakness and killing it was a very important strategy. When animals were at their weakest, that was when they lost their balance. Therefore, before the mountain lion could get up, Jiang Hai had already pounced on its body. His legs instantly clamped on its stomach, and his hands wrapped around its neck. He kept exerting force, trying to subdue this guy. However, Jiang Hai had underestimated it. Although Jiang Hai was holding it in place, the mountain lion was still struggling and rolling on the ground. It wanted to throw Jiang Hai off, so much so that Jiang Hai's hands, which were wrapped around its neck, couldn't exert any strength. Looking at the dust flying in front of her, Qi Li was completely dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say, Her eyes were filled with the scene of the battle between Jiang Hai and the mountain lion. She never thought that Jiang Hai would be so strong. Suddenly, she realized that she didn't seem to know much about Jiang Hai. He knew how to raise cows and fish, and he had the ability to get the Walton family to come over and talk about cooperation with him. He could fight with such a lion bare-handed. At least, she didn't even dare to think about such a thing in the past. Unknowingly, she had started to care about Jiang Hai because her toy had been stolen. Unknowingly, she felt that Jiang Hai had slowly walked into her heart. Just as she was in a daze, 2 figures suddenly flew past her. It was because of these 2 figures that she came back to her senses. When she looked at the center of the field, she saw that the two huge dogs she had seen outside Jiang Hai's room had already joined the battle. These two big dogs, any one of them is actually not smaller than the lion over there. In a one-on-one fight, the lion may not be a match, let alone a group of them. Moreover, there is Jiang Hai on his back. He wanted to scare off the two dogs here. However, just as it bared its teeth, the big gray wolf, Goldie, had already slapped it hard on the head. Goldie's sharp claws instantly opened 3 wounds on its face. Blood was already flowing out, and its flesh was also torn open. As for the big black dog, Xiaobai, it rushed to the mountain lion's hind leg and bit it. Fortunately, the mountain lion was very smart. At the critical moment, it swept its tail and didn't directly bite the leg bone. Otherwise, with Xiaobai's bite force, it would be crippled in the future. Even so, when Xiaobai raised its head, it still took a big piece of meat from its thigh. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Although this sentence wasn't absolute, it seemed to make some sense now. Roar, roar. The pain and deterrence caused by the two dogs made the mountain lion panic and roar loudly. Chapter 269. Opportunity. However, its cry was an opportunity for Jiang Hai, who had been behind it the whole time. Jiang Hai's eyes lit up, and he exerted force with both hands. This time, the mountain lion did not have time to resist. It was firmly pressed under Jiang Hai's body. Feeling the power from Jiang Hai and the two vicious dogs beside it, the mountain lion, which had little strength left, surrendered this time. Other than gasping for breath, it did not move anymore. At this time, Robbins, Bell, Edward Anderson, and all the men in Jiang Hai's manor ran over with guns and cannons. Even Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and Chi Li's assistant, who had not come out yet, ran over. Especially the assistant, she was obviously frightened at this time. After all, for Pra Walton and the others, guns were not prohibited in the United States. They were very calm when they saw guns. There must be something in the manor that required guns. Otherwise, it would be impossible to mobilize so many people. However, Chi Li's assistant had never seen such a scene. She even suspected that a war was about to break out. However, when she came over and found her general manager sitting on the ground, she immediately rushed over and helped her up. Following Chi Li's gaze, she saw a lion lying on the ground at this time. Jiang Hai and the two dogs surrounded the lion in the middle. For some reason, she suddenly felt that the lion was a little pitiful. It's a cougar. A cougar actually entered the manor. Seeing the animal under Jiang Hai, the people here could not help but feel a little surprised. Especially Bell and Marin Rupert, their faces were a little ugly. After all, they were responsible for patrolling the border. It was their responsibility to steal fish, and it was also their responsibility to invade from land. In the past, there were no helicopters, so there was no way to patrol so many times. But now that there are helicopters, they actually missed something. This is unacceptable for them. Hurry up and get a cage and put it in. Seeing that everyone was a little hesitant, Jiang Hai ordered loudly. Boss, this guy invaded our manor. Let's just kill it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell's tone carried a trace of anger. A mountain lion entered the manor, this was his responsibility. Now, he just wanted to kill this guy to remind himself and vent his anger at the same time. Don't kill it first. I remember that this thing should be a protected animal. Let's catch it first. After thinking about it for a while, Jiang Hai decided that killing this guy was quite tempting. Not only could he taste the mountain lion meat, but he could also get a body of mountain lion skin. However, considering that the population of these guys wasn't very developed, and that he had to do business recently, he decided to do a good deed. So, Jiang Hai decided to pack it up first and think about it later. Hearing that Jiang Hai has already spoken, Belle and Robbins had to return to the manor and bring a cage that Jiang Hai used to store Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. It's unknown whether this mountain lion is really weak or it has already admitted defeat. After Jiang Hai left, it did not struggle too much. Instead, it was really carried into the cage by Jiang Hai and others. What do we do next? Robbins asked in a low voice as he looked at the mountain lion lying there alone after entering the cage. Feed it something, then I'll call the police station and ask. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai patted the soil on his body and said to Robbins. Then, he took out his phone from his pocket and called the police station. The police station was also surprised after learning that Jiang Hai caught a mountain lion alive, but according to the police station, this matter was actually not under their jurisdiction. If the mountain lion broke into the homestay and killed it, it was under their jurisdiction. But now that it has been caught, it was under the jurisdiction of the Wildlife Conservation Center. However, Winthrop is not a big town after all. Therefore, the Wildlife Conservation Center was actually located together with the Stray Pet Center. At this time, the center was already closed. Since Jiang Hai had already caught this thing, he would have to trouble him to send this thing to the town tomorrow. Hearing the police's words, Jiang Hai didn't care. After saying a few words, he hung up the phone. Then, everyone worked together and carried the mountain lion into Jiang Hai's villa. Then, Jiang Hai drove everyone back. It was late at night, and everyone was tired after coming out. It was better to go back and rest early. As for the sisters in Jiang Hai's villa, they were also driven back to sleep by Jiang Hai. Prawalton and Selena Gomez didn't need Jiang Hai to tell them to go upstairs to sleep. Only Chi Li and her assistant stayed here. What can I do for you? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was squatting in front of the cage and still observing the animal, Chi Li hesitated and asked Jiang Hai. But when she asked, her face was a little red. It's okay, didn't we finish talking about our business? You go back to sleep, it's okay. However, Jiang Hai was clearly a person who didn't understand a girl's thoughts, so he just waved his hand and continued to stare at the mountain lion. Oh, I see, okay then. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to want her help, Chi Li couldn't help but stroke her hair a little disappointedly, then went upstairs with her assistant. But at this time, Jiang Hai didn't consider Chi Li's thoughts at all. His eyes were staring at the mountain lion. And the mountain lion was also staring at him. He had to admit that sometimes beasts had much better intuition than humans. Although it dared to confront Jiang Hai just now, at this time, the mountain lion was much more obedient. It just stayed there and looked at Jiang Hai cautiously. Regarding its gaze, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied. Then he stood up, went to get a basin of water for it, and went to the warehouse to get a piece of meat for it. This is a real ferocious beast. It's my first time seeing it and catching it, so I'm a little excited. Looking at the guy in front of him, Jiang Hai muttered softly. He finally understood why those rich people liked to hunt and hunt so much. It was because catching these beasts was indeed something to be proud of. Let's take a look at it before it's sent to town. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai directly sat on the ground. His house wasn't dirty, and the floor was cleaned by Aphrodite and the others every day. He just stared at the mountain lion like this with wistful eyes. As for the mountain lion, it didn't care about Jiang Hai's gaze. It was still lying in the cage, chewing on the meat and drinking some water from time to time. At this time, Chi Li, who had returned to the second floor, took one last look at Jiang Hai, who was still playing with the lion on the first floor, and couldn't help but mutter softly, "Blockhead." Then, she quickly walked to her room. CEO Chi, did you just say something? Chi Li's assistant, who was originally a little confused, vaguely heard Chi Li mutter something. However, she didn't hear it clearly, so she immediately asked. No, you heard wrong. Hearing her words, Qi Li naturally had to flatly deny. CEO Qi, should we change our itinerary? This place is really too scary. Not only are there lions, did you see that just now? Everyone here has a gun. That big beard is holding a gun. It's too scary. Is Jiang Hai really raising cows? Why do I feel like he set up a government armed force here? Hearing Qi Li's words, the assistant immediately took a step forward with a frightened expression. At the same time, she whispered to Qi Li, her eyes flashing. Are you willing to part with the food here? I still remember that during dinner, those 2 lobsters, those abalones, and those beef. TSK. Hearing her words, Qi Li didn't stop walking. As she walked, she said with a smile. Then let's have another meal before we leave. Hearing Qi Li mention dinner, the assistant became uncertain again. After hesitating for a long time, she finally stomped her feet, gritted her teeth, and said as if she had accepted her fate. However, Qi Li was too lazy to pay attention to her at this time. She walked back to her room and closed the door. She went to the bathroom to take a shower again, then threw herself on the big bed. At this time, it was almost 12:00 at night, but she didn't feel sleepy at all. Looking at the ceiling, she seemed to see the night when Jiang Hai hugged her and spun in circles to escape from the mountain lion's bloody mouth. Everything in those few seconds was as beautiful as a painting, except for the last moment. That guy is really a block of wood, but he's quite cute. I didn't expect that the hero saving the damsel in distress that I originally despised and thought was the most melodramatic was actually quite romantic when it was performed. If Jiang Hai hadn't made her fall, if Jiang Hai had asked her to stay with him on the first floor, if Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" After subduing the mountain lion, Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" That was such a pleasant thing to do. But unfortunately, none of these happened. But for Qi Li, even if none of these happened, tonight was already perfect. However, while she was happily sleeping, some people couldn't fall asleep. Bang! A glass bottle fell to the marble floor. An Zhangwu, who had been trying to win back Qi Li, was now drunk in his living room, and in front of him in the dining room, there were several photos of Qi Li and her assistant getting off the plane in Boston, photos of Qi Li and her assistant going to Jiang Hai's manor, and so on. Although there were no photos in the manor, it was obvious that a mature and beautiful woman took the initiative to throw herself into the arms of her nominal husband. There was no need to explain what would happen next. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.